Hello, how are you?
I'm pretty good, and I feel like I got more comfortable and confident with all of that.
Oh,
Cause
that's fantastic.
yeah, and I found some YouTube videos on muscles, so I was watching them all day today.
Oh, good. Good for you, Katerina.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. All right, we are recording, so we're good. Everybody's hopping on. We're gonna do a slideshow from current slide. All right, so as everybody's popping on, do you see a slide that says strong app for tracking?
Yes.
Yay! All right, so I want to say thanks to Jen because this was the app that she was talking about the other night. Um, so I am, no, we don't want to do that. I'm going to copy this and maybe put it in the chat. Uh, Chat, paste. So I just put that into the chat for everybody so you can grab that link. And if you don't get it, no worries. It's going to actually be in the PDF slide deck that you get. So you can click right off of that as well. So it is in the chat. All right. And I took a look at it. It looks great. I mean, there's lots of functionality and it's free from what I can tell. So that's always great. So, take a look at it. Look through the reviews. There were a couple of people that had some issues with bugs, and I think that happens every time they update an app. As far as things were working the way they should, but a lot of people really liked it. So anyway, and that's just one of the apps that are there. So if you don't remember, we were talking about tracking your workouts for yourself and even for clients to track. And if they had a way that is easy for them and they'll be consistent with it, that's great. And a lot of people have their phones when they're working out, they're listening to music. So this might be an opportunity to also track their workout at the same time. All right. And that's it. So and last time we started with chapter 5, and I'm just going to do a really quick recap as we're going through, just so that we can kind of pick up where we left off. So a quick recap, we were talking about creating the program and literally right from the beginning when you start to meet the client. So, introducing yourself, learning their name, making sure you spell it correctly, being approachable, doing that short tour of the facility, introducing them to other people. And then you're going to take them to a quiet spot or a private office if you have one to finish off those intake forms. You'll probably receive intake forms from your facility. There's lots online. I have some if people are interested in using them. So they are readily available. We also talked about potentially having them do the PAR-Q if they already hadn't done one, before you start taking all their information, just so that, we know that they're ready to begin exercising. And if they're not, you're not going to waste their time and your time going through a whole bunch of information and then have them not be able to exercise. So doing that up front is always great. You're going to, and part of the intake process, you are gathering information. You're going to obtain the client's history, talk about anything that went on in their past injuries or lifestyle. You get a clue. What do you do throughout your day? How do you start your day? When do you eat? Those kinds of things. You can gather lots of great information, and then when they give you their answer, you can build on that, asking open-ended questions. And then you're going to kind of hone in on, exactly why they had come to see you, what is it that they're looking for to get out of working with you or having a program. And they're going to focus in on, a couple of things that they want to prioritize. So if they give you a list of 3 or 4 or 5 things, ask them what their top 2 are that they'd want to work towards. And then the other ones, you can do at a future date. And then always explain that there's risks, potential for injury in any exercise program that they do. just so they're aware of that. You probably have a liability form that you might want to be using. And then we're going to listen, right? We're going to listen to what they say. And then as far as what kinds of assessments that you can do as part of that intake, you might actually, so you might have separate sessions. You might have just that intake session, gathering all the information. You may also get them to do a little bit of a physical activity, right? You can get them to do movement patterns. So you might do some exercise, get them to do exercises like squats or push-ups if they're capable, do some core work. Based on the individual who's in front of you and what their abilities are. And you'll know, they can't do push-ups, but maybe they can do push-ups on a wall, right? You can calculate their exercise training zone, and you can do that by using their Kervonen method. You can do girth measurements. You can take their blood pressure. If they have their resting heart rate, you can get that. So that's how you're going to be able to use your Kervonen method. So all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, you're doing whatever is within your scope of practice. And if you need help from another evaluator, of course, you can ask for that. And as part of the goal setting process, again, you want to ask a lot of open-ended questions, listen to what they're telling you. Remember, is that on the next page? Yes, it is. Okay, so I won't cover that right now. So you're going to have them set both short and long-term goals. So if they want to lose, 30 pounds, for example, and you're doing that through physical activity and they're doing some nutrition on the side, then, maybe that 30 pounds is in 6 months, but let's look at, what's going to happen in month 1 or month 2 or 6 weeks out. So we're going to set some short-term goals to hit in between the long-term goals, and then those milestones, they become markers of progress. Or if they're not seeing the progress, excuse me, that they're looking for, then you really know that you need to tweak their program, right? Or find out what else is happening, because maybe you gave them a great program, but they're not doing it all, right? So those check-ins become very important, those milestones. And then, of course, we're going to find out what their interests are, what they like, dislike, and ask them, what kind of movement or exercise do you like to do? And try to incorporate some of that. Of course, we're always wanting to be realistic with them, setting realistic timelines. We want to reevaluate regularly, and I did mention that, every 6 to 8 weeks, we want to, kind of do a little review, get them to do a reassessment to see what the progress is like. That could include measurements. That might be getting them to do movement patterns, checking their blood pressure, all of those kinds of things, but also getting them, excuse me, to see where they are with the, how much weight they can push. So there's different ways that you can reassess. And then, of course, we always want to keep a record of their progress. I mean, for yourself or for a client, they can record stuff on an app like Strong. You're going to want to have something written out, right? That you can have as well. And then, as I mentioned, when you're having this conversation with the client, you want to listen to what they're telling you, because that's going to give you clues to how you're going to form or shape that program. So if they're talking about toning and weight loss and firming up and, just overall general fitness, you're probably looking at an endurance type program. Certainly if they're a beginner, you're going to look at an endurance type program for resistance training. And then if they're talking about shaping and bodybuilding and muscle gains, we know that they're interested in hypertrophy. So you're going to create the program accordingly. And same with strength. If you hear words like powerlifting and sports performance, that type of thing. And again, start where they're at. Even though they might say, I'm really excited about powerlifting, it's like, okay, that's wonderful, but we're going to start here. And you can tell them why. You can explain that it's more important for them to get the form down. And then, if they want to be really strong, they got to build muscle first, because muscle has more force production. The bigger the muscle, the more force production. So, give them kind of the steps they need to get to where they want to go, and be realistic. So we know that as we're creating this program for them, sometimes they're not going to be or they're with us, sometimes they're not. So we want to have a scheduled program that fits the client's needs. It should be realistic. and include the time of day, anything, make your program smart as well. So we always talk about SMART goals, but make the program smart. Put in the time of day if you can. If they say I'm going to go to the gym for 6, put it in, they're going to the gym for 6, right? And you know, the frequency, the days of the week, and the duration. And remember, they're working with you, but some of that time, obviously, they're going to be working on their own. So make sure that's all captured in their program. And then as you're creating this program, you're thinking all the time in the back of your head, your mind, like, what is the exercise's ability at this time? Because I might start off with some easy ones, and then gradually as their form gets better and their ability increases, then I'm going to add different exercises. What their time constraints are, like, so are they better off coming in and doing, you know, even though we talk about doing full body, maybe they don't have a whole hour. Maybe they have a half an hour. So you know what? Maybe they do, even as a beginner, they might do a little bit of a split routine, because it's better to say, I can get into the gym for half an hour and work on legs, or I can get in and work on upper body, than not come at all because they don't have the time, right? And then you look at, again, you're always going to want to match the goals of the client. You want to think about what kind of equipment do you have available to use, both in the facility that you're training them at, but also when they go home, you know, what do they have to work with? Because maybe they're not coming back to the gym all the time. Maybe they want to work at home. So you might want to create some programs they can do there. Always taking into consideration what they like and dislike, and again, past injuries. And we also talked about balancing out muscle. So we looked at, and part of the assessment should be their posture analysis, right? And that could be very rudimentary, just having them stand there and kind of giving an assessment. You know, are their shoulders level? Are their shoulders rounded? You know, do they have posterior, anterior tilt? Anything that's going on there. And of course, we want to address that before we start putting a whole bunch of weight in their hands, or getting them to do movements that could cause problems because they don't have balance in the muscle. And that's why it's very important to know what those opposing muscles are. We want to look at, you know, what's happening in the front and the back, the right and the left, upper and lower, balancing everything out. And then of course, you know, we want to always keep them motivated. And what type of motivation do we want to encourage for them? Intrinsic or extrinsic?
Intrinsic.
Intrinsic, exactly. So we always want to try to tie their goal into something that really matters to them, that's personal to them, and that's going to keep them motivated. Once we've figured all that out, right, then we're going to determine the muscles we're going to get trained, you know, put in their program for their resistance training program. And that will include all of the major muscle groups, and we have listed here, right, our legs, our back, our chest, and our smaller muscles as well, and our core. And always go back to, like, you want to consider if there's any imbalances, you want to correct those before you get too heavy into doing some of the bigger exercises. So we may start off at the very beginning, getting them to do a lot of core exercises to keep, you know, to strengthen their core before we get them to do anything with squats, you know. So it depends on where you find the weakness. All right, I think that was kind of our recap. So from the last day when we started on, you know, what we're going to be doing when we start working with clients. So now we're going to look at how we sequence exercises. So how we sequence exercises will affect the intensity of the program. So the arrangement, the sequencing affects the intensity that's required to safely perform the workout program. So it's really important to put the exercises in the correct order. So we want to do multi-joint first. So what would be an example of a multi-joint exercise?
Seated row.
I'm sorry, what?
Seated row.
Yeah, seated row could be absolutely a multi-joint exercise, yeah. And you would do that before you would do like a bicep curl, right? You would do an overhead press before you do bicep curl, that type of thing. But if you were doing lower body, for example, the big movements like squats and lunges, that they are working multi-joint. compared to do an isolation exercise, like sitting in a machine and doing leg extension or leg curl. Right, so there we're just literally working the knee, at the knee joint pretty much. So you want to do the big exercises first. Same with you for upper body. You'll want to do chest press, because that would be using the bigger muscles and multi-joint before you do maybe a side raise, right? So we want to work smaller muscles or bigger muscles first, then small multi-joint before single joint. Okay. And even though in the book it talks about doing abdominal exercises last or fine, and you can. I like to work my way up the body and then do the abdominal exercises last. I like it because my clients are down on the mat, and then once they're finished that, usually we can go right into a nice stretch session because they're already there. But you can include abdominal exercises throughout if you want. They could even be part of your active rest. You can get creative. We just don't want to tire the body out, because if you're doing a lot of abdominal, remember, the core is active in a lot of our big movements. So we don't want to tire our core out too much first at the beginning. Once you get into the more isolation exercises, then it's not as important. You can do abdominal if you want to add some things in. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And the big thing, I guess, is that you want to do the big muscles before the smaller, or multi-joint before single, because you want to be able to finish the workout safely. So for example, if you were doing a lot of bicep curls or raises or something that were using the smaller arm muscles or the shoulder, the deltoid muscles, you're going to be really fatigued. And if they're trying to do, a heavier lift, an overhead press or something, right? And they may be more susceptible to injury. So, and even things like working our lower back muscles before performing squats. That's why I like to start with the lower body first if I'm doing a full body workout, because, the core is still nice and strong, and we haven't tired it out yet. So it's there to support and stabilize as we're doing the squats safely, especially if you're adding weight. All right. And again, always everything we sequence or everything we put together as exercises should reflect the goals of the participant. So the frequency, really, the intensity will determine the frequency. And remember, go back to your chart if you are wondering about that. Normally, again, if it's endurance, what is the time in between workouts if we're looking at more of an endurance program?
Can be 24 hours.
Yeah, 24. And then it goes up for hypertrophy, then we're more around 48, and then it could be even more for strength, right? So the intensity determines your frequency. And then again, how often your client can commit, right? You might think they need to come in 3 days a week. They might only be able to come in one. So this is really going to determine, what you're going to give them as far as a program. When you're starting off with sets, if you're a beginner, and I mentioned this before, we don't want them to be sore because that can really demotivate them, right? So when we're starting off with exercises, we might only give them one set and get them, if they're doing higher reps because it's an endurance, they might be doing 15 reps. So they're getting a lot of reps in, even though it's one set, right? And then as they get better with the form and they're able to add extra weight, that means they're going to be doing less reps. Then we might go to, 2 sets and then 3 sets. And then of course, in a more advanced program, they could even go up to 8 sets. Probably not, but some 6 to 8, but that would usually be for accessory muscles. Or it could be, again, if we were doing for power, because we remember with power, we're really close to that 1 rep max. So they might only be doing 1 or 2 reps in each set. So it may take them 6 or even 8 sets to get all their volume in, right? So again, it depends on what you're doing and how much weight you're lifting. All right, and then determining the rest in between sets, we said the closer to that 1 rep max, you know, it's going to be a longer rest time. And that's, you know, one of the reasons is because we know our ATP-CP takes a while to replenish. And then, you know, if they're doing endurance, it's not going to take them long because they're not really using a lot of their muscle fibers and their energy, right? So they can recuperate very quickly or recover very quickly. They're, you know, they might even be going into closer to that aerobic system by that time where they get in so many reps, right? So they may be burning more anaerobic than, or more aerobic than anaerobic. All right, you can do a shorter rest period if you are supersetting. What is a superset?
You work different muscle groups back to back, like you don't work the same ones, but
Yeah, exactly. So it involves performing 2 exercises back to back with little or no rest. And they can target the same muscle group, but most of the time they're working opposing groups. So you might do like a chest press, dumbbell chest press, and then do bent over rows. So you do those back to back and then take your rest. Right. And then you might do, you know, bicep, or if you wanted to work the same muscle, you might do, or muscle group, you might do bicep curls, followed by hammer curls, right? So bicep curls with supinated, your hands are supinated, and then do hammer curls. So you're still doing your bicep brachial muscles, but you're working them in a little different way. So that could be an example of a superset. And you don't rest in between those 2 exercises, and then you take your break, and then you go back and do them again. So it's a way that you can increase your intensity, your workout intensity. You can save time, and then you can also improve muscle endurance too. So supersetting is a style of training that that you can incorporate with your clients as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. All right, so, and we've seen this before. This is the same chart we looked at pretty much. So the frequency for muscular endurance, you just be familiar with this chart. All right, and we know as we get closer to our 1 rep max, it's going to take longer for a recovery in between workouts, for rest in between sets. We also know that we're going to do a lot less reps because we're getting closer to the 1 rep max, and our sets can increase because because we're doing so low, such a low number of reps that we need to do more sets to make up the volume, right? So just get familiar with that. All right, so how long, if we're creating a program for our clients, what is the duration for most programs?
6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, it can be anywhere, you know, it can be 4 to 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. It really depends on the client and the type of progress they're doing. So and that's pretty typical. So why is change important? Why do we want to, you know, why do we not want to be doing the same program for 6 months?
So you won't get bored, and so that you work different muscles different, or the muscles differently.
Yeah, so boredom is for sure, but what about gains?
Yeah, your muscles, they need like different exercises so they
What's that
get
principle?
used.
Yeah, what's that principle?
Muscle confusion? Is it like muscle confusion?
Yeah, so it's the overload principle, the principle of progression and the overload principle. And we need to, you know, we need to make change because your body adapts, and in order for it to see change, we need to continue the increase the overload. So that could be with resistance, or it could increase the intensity, right? That could be with your smaller rest time, or you know, more reps or more sets. Like you can change all the longer, you know, the tempo can change, slow it down. So change is important to see progress. And when I say a program can last 1 day, now most of them go 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, but you could throw in a you could do have your program 4 to 6 weeks, and then you might even have a day or two in 1 week that you're doing something totally different. You could be doing Tabatas, right? Do a whole day or a whole session with just Tabatas, and then you go back to your regular session. So you're kind of mixing it up, having some fun with the client, and they usually enjoy it because it's a change from what they normally do. But you can also see that as when you're doing your assessment. So maybe you do a Tabata day and they could be doing kettlebell swings or different types of exercises, and maybe when they're doing a Tabata. So first of all, does everybody know what a Tabata is?
No, I don't. I was just gonna ask you what is
Okay. So let me step back and explain what that is. So Tabata is a style of training, and it's kind of pretty much all out effort. It's 4 minutes of work. So it's eight segments. You have 20 seconds of work and 10 seconds of rest. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're working to your potential, so in that 20 seconds, you're really working flat out. So you're in that ATP-CP system. Then you have 10 seconds of rest, and then you do it again. So depending on the activity, I've done it with kettlebell swings, I've done it with battle ropes, I've done it with different things, and it is intensive. And when people first do it, they may only get through the first 3 or 4 of the work segments, and then they can't continue because they're exhausted. But if you do that, if they are continually training, and then you do it again, and then they say, oh, gee, now I can do 6 of those out of 8, and before I could only do 4, and then they get to the point where they can do all 8. So depending on the exercise. So Tabata is just it's a training style. It's kind of, I guess you could consider it HIIT, but there's Tabata apps. I have them on my phone and I use them, and they're great depending on the exercise. And as a matter of fact, we will do some Tabatas on Saturday. So we'll have some fun with that. All right. And then, so optimally we can update even every 3 to 4 weeks as they improve. But again, it comes down to the client, right? But we don't want it to go beyond 8 weeks typically, because by that time they should have seen some progress, and you want to maybe start making some changes. All right, and so there's so many different training methods. Like I said, I talked about the debate. Oh my gosh, there's so many different ones. We're going to talk about what those are, and then which ones are the best. Well, there's no one right answer to that. It really depends on the client, what their goals are, what your comfort level is with some of this training. So there's lots of options for you. I guess that's what I'm putting out there. I encourage people to experiment, try these different types of training and see what you like, see what you think would work well for some of your clients as you're going through. And, what works with one person may not work with another, and you'll gain experience as you go, just trying things. So first of all, we want to determine the training method to maximize their training gains. So we've got single sets, and this is probably the most common. This is the one that you're going to use with most of your beginners. And we talked about like doing endurance, but once they've kind of gotten beyond the endurance and they're working more towards, hypertrophy maybe, so that some of their reps comes down a little bit maybe. So you're in that range between 8 to 15 reps, right? And that's good for beginners. And then we talked about multiple sets. So supersets could be an example of that. And then also doing just more than one set of the same exercise. So you can be doing, 3 or 4 sets of the same exercise. And then we have, circuit training where they could be moving from station to station. And then a super circuit, so you could be combining some cardio and strength depending. So if their goal is like they want to improve their cardio, but they also want to get strong, this might be a great kind of combination where they're combining activities that are more cardiovascular in some stations and they're more strength in others. So you get the benefit of an aerobic exercise and an anaerobic exercise. So to give you an example, I worked with a coach, and one of the things he had us do was when I was partner training, my partner would be maybe doing bench press, and then I might be on the treadmill. And when she finished her set, we'd switch it out. And so that would be, she'd do maybe 4 sets, and she might have, 30 or 40 seconds of rest in between. Meanwhile, I'm on the treadmill. And then when she's done, we switch it out. So that would be an example of doing sort of an aerobic and an anaerobic workout. And you just, so every time you do exercise, an anaerobic exercise, so resistance training, strength training, the other person's doing aerobic. Or you can just mix it up even in the workout for one person, right? So you can get them to do something that's strength related, then get them to do something that's aerobic related, and go back and forth. So there's lots of options there. And then we already talked about supersets. So typically we're working opposing muscle. You can use the same muscle group, but often more often than not, it's working the opposing. So you could be doing a push-pull, triceps and biceps would be an example of that, or back and chest. You can do multi-joint, right? So works more than one muscle or muscle group at the time. Many joints are involved, and it's more functional. And a good example of that would be when we were talking about functional training in the first session, and we were talking about doing a squat and then an overhead press, right? Or kind of a wood chopping and a squat, like those types of functional movements, those involve a lot of joints. So doing multi-joint training is really great as well. It's kind of like functional training. And then we have some really advanced techniques, things like super slow training, and it's just like it sounds. So you'd be doing, 8 to 10 seconds on a concentric contraction, and then the same on the eccentric. So very, very slow. You can also do, and so if you were doing really slow, your time under tension, right? The muscle time under tension would be a lot longer, and you're going to probably have good result. You can have some good results with muscle growth and hypertrophy with that type of training. You can also do training to failure. And why is that good? What are we recruiting?
More muscle, different.
Yeah.
All
More
the
muscle fibers and all of our like the motor units, right? And our muscles. So, that actually does help to build muscle. Going to failure exhaustion is often used by bodybuilders, right? And then the other one would be, of course, would be a split routine, and that's doing different parts of the body on different days. And you need to plan it properly, or you can start to neglect or overwork certain muscles. Rotation is key, and then also depending on what muscle groups that you're including in each of those exercises. So what I want you to take away from this, there's so many different styles of training, and this isn't even it. We've got even more. When you're starting off with beginners, and a lot of you will probably be working with beginners when you first start training. Just start them with simple exercises, couple of sets, keep your reps high, your weights low, and then gradually increase the intensity. And then once they get to a certain stage, kind of the world opens up, and depending on their goals, there's just so many different ways you can train them. And it also comes down to what they enjoy, right? All right, let's look. So if we were going to do a split routine, because that's probably a fairly common thing. What do you think? What are some of the ideas that you could think for split routines?
Push, pull legs,
legs.
Yeah,
upper, lower.
upper, lower, yeah. Yeah, you could those are all so you can do upper, lower, anterior, posterior. You can do legs one day, chest and back another day, push, pull. Like there's so many different ways that you can do it. And just considering, what body parts that you're including in that and how many days per week. And we know we do want to try to get full, like the full body at least twice a week would be wonderful. But if you're doing a split routine, that becomes really challenging, right? So some weeks you may get legs in twice, and one week you might only get it in once, depending on how you're rotating your exercises or exercise days, and then, you know, how many days you're coming into the gym. So that becomes important as you're putting things together. So let's look at a couple of examples of a exercise program. So if you were doing a 2-day split, and this is if they're coming 4 days a week to the gym, they could be doing, you know, upper body one day, lower body the next day, and then they take a rest day, and then they just repeat it if the muscles have recovered, right? So you're just kind of on a rotation, upper, lower. Very simple. And then if they did 2-day, they could do all push and all push exercises and all pull exercises and some core in there, right? So day 1, all push, day 2, all pull, and then core in both. That's another way you could split if you were going 4 days a week. You could, in this 3-day split, you could do, you know, we've got our chest, we've got our back in there. We've got back muscles again. Or, I'm sorry, chest and shoulders or triceps and our quads. And then we have our back muscles and our biceps, then we do leg and core, and then we rest, and then we do it all over again, right? So, and then we have the bottom split, we have push pull, we have legs, and so on. So, and that's coming 6 days a week. So, you know, for the majority of the time, you know, your clients, when they first start off, they might only be coming 2 or 3 days a week. You know, this is a kind of an extreme example, but it just gives you a good idea of there's just so many ways that you can split out your workouts. And we were mentioning about, let me just get all these in here. I think that's it. So we were also talking about different types of techniques. And I think, Alex, you mentioned, you know, about having client do one set at a lower weight and then taking them to a higher weight and then taking to a lower. So these are kind of different techniques that are very similar. I said it was close to like what a pyramid set might look like, but you can do also variable training. So maybe it's closer to this, adjusting between heavy and light. So you're increasing or decreasing the reps. You can do pyramid sets. You can do ascending sets, which is similar to a pyramid. And then we can do strip sets or drop sets. And I'll tell you, if you've never done a drop set, holy moly, it can be it can be very humbling. If you do tricep press push down on a cable machine, and you set the cable and you do your regular whatever you do for 8 or 10 reps, or then do it to fatigue and then take the weight down a little bit, do it to fatigue, take the weight down a little bit. By the time you get down, you might be doing like 5 pounds and it's going to feel like 100. So you're going to fatigue in each set. And yeah, it can be very humbling. But these are some examples of, you know, variable training. You're doing, you know, 70% of your 1 rep max, then 60, then 80s. And so that's kind of a muscle confusion type of training. Pyramid, you're just, you know, it's same thing, going up, down, you're varying your reps based on the weight. So as the weight goes up, the reps go down, and then as the weight goes down, the reps go back up again. So that's pyramid training. And then the ascending, going up, and of course we said drop sets. So and I hope you're taking away is that there's just not one way of training. There's so many different ways of training, and you just got to find what works best for your client and what you feel comfortable training. And then we've got pre-exhaust. Now, I'm just going to take a step back and just say to you, you don't have to know all this for the exam. This is just information for you going forward as you're training. I'll call it what's expected for you to know as you're going through. Okay. So we've got pre-exhaustion or compound sets, right? So we're isolating one muscle group. And then we do a compound exercise for that one muscle group. So you can do, you know, a superset with no rest in between, like do pec deck and then a bench press, or you can do 3 sets of each of these exercises individually. So there's just different ways of doing things.
Excuse me, Heather, what does it mean there, compound exercise? What's
So
that?
compound is like a multi-joint. So think of like squats, lunges, those are, it's a compound would be another a word for multi-joint. That it's just like you can interchange them.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, because I don't know if I used that term before, so that was a good question. So now the group knows, because you will see compound exercise come up sometimes in when you're reading other books, materials, blogs, that kind of thing. And then we've got negative, like eccentric loading, right? So more weight, but help on the concentric phase. And I mentioned that when we were doing spotting. So you can, for example, if you were spotting somebody that was doing an overhead press, right? So you can help them in the concentric and then they do the eccentric on their own. Another one would be if people are trying to learn how to do a pull-up, you can actually help them in the concentric phase. You might help them lift up so they're pulled up onto the bar and then they lower themselves. So that's kind of what that type of exercise would be. All right, and then we have, oh, this is one of my favorites. I even use this with my older ladies group, and they've grown, but they love it. So 21s, for example, if you're doing bicep curls, if you think of a full range of motion, so you might do 7 reps in the upper range of motion. So if you were starting with your forearms parallel to the floor in a bicep curl, you'd come up and then you'd only go halfway down. So your arms are your forearms parallel, you come back up. So you're only going half of the range of motion, and you do that 7 reps, and then you go all the way down, and then you only come up halfway. So you're stopping at that sticking point. So that makes it really challenging, right? And then the last 7 would be the full range of motion. So that's just one exercise for, that you can, have some fun with bicep curls and working all the different range of motion in that. Then we have Olympic lifting, very fast and explosive. It's probably not something you guys would be doing right off the bat. And then micro addition progression. So adding a small amount of weight every time you exercise. I don't necessarily, think this is the best route, but it does incrementally increase. The challenge with that though is finding that micro progression, because if you're using free weights, especially in the gym, usually they go, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds if you've got dumbbells. So if you can add on your own weight and some of the bars, maybe that's possible. Even the machines, typically you don't get, you get a pretty good difference in at least 5 or 10 pounds. So this one's not as easy to do, but it's an option. All right, pre-fatigue. I'm just going to go through these. Priority training. I mean, these are just all, I'm not going to belabor them because we've got a lot of information to get through, but I just want you to see that there is a lot of different options. All right, so this is a important one. So I'm going to give you a list of things that you would do in a workout, and I want the group to put it in order. So I want you to, so what would the first thing out of all of these things, what is the first thing that you would do?
Dynamic range of motion movements.
Dynamic range of motion. Yes. What's the next one?
Maybe some cardio.
Cardio endurance training. Okay. And what will come after that?
Alternating,
Go ahead.
alternating groups of muscles. I think we were
Yes.
saying the same thing.
Exactly. And then what will come after that?
Stabilizer muscles?
Stabilizer. Yep. And what's left?
Stretching.
Exactly. All right, perfect. You guys are great. You know your stuff. Exactly. So if you know that, it's a good thing to know. All right. That's
Isn't it
wonderful.
kind of a misnomer to say cardiac endurance training? Because you're not really going to be doing much in the way of endurance training, right? I mean, it's more of a warm up than it is.
Well, actually, yes and no, because that could be a warm up, but it also could be, remember, you can include cardio in the workout. You said it was like typically if you are doing, look, I guess what we're taking away from this is just a good progression. So if you're doing, you know, the dynamic range of motion movements, that could be part of the warm up. And then the cardio endurance training. So cardio endurance is different than warm up, right? So we're actually doing something to increase our cardiovascular capacity, whereas in warm up or not. We're just warming up our muscles. And then we go to the alternating group of muscles. So it's yeah, so it's just one way of thinking of how to put together a program, right? But we know that dynamic range of motion, that's going to be first because that's part of our warm-up. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking back to what we were talking about last.
Which is like, you know, whether you do resistance training first or endurance training first. Yeah. In this case, I'm going to leave it at this because it's important to know, and I have stars here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But we know going out in practice, you have the ability to determine what, you know, whether cardio will come after or muscle will go before stretching, of course, but whether you do resistance training before cardio, just based on the goals. But in this instance, we'll leave it like that. All right. We're going to also, when we do our workout card, these are all the things we're going to write down for them. You know, we've got their goals. We're going to, of course, give them their sets, reps, weights, what the exercises are, what the muscles are working, you know, how much rest, you know, how often. And the other thing, you may also want to put in there, for example, how long they should warm up, how long they should stretch at the end, that type of thing. So capture as much information as you can for the client. You might also put in what the tempo should be, because remember, especially when they're first starting off, they may just do things very quickly to get through it because they don't know. So you might even just say, we're going to count to 1, 2 on the up phase and 1, 2 in the down phase, right? So as much information as you can get in there is great. The other thing that we don't have in here that I do for clients is that when you get them set up on the machine, there's often all kinds of adjustments, and the adjustments often either have a number or a letter that's associated with it. So I'll write it down. So I'll say, you know, if they go to a leg press and they're going to adjust the platform to this, you know, and our machine in our building, I'm on a 3. So I put it on the 3. So I know that's what I use. That gives me the best range of motion. If I go on the leg extension, leg curl machine, I know what my number is on the big wheel, right? To make the adjustments and what my seat number is. So if you write that down for them when they first are, you know, start learning how to set everything up, it makes it so much easier because they're going to come back the next time. They're going to look at that machine and have no idea how to set it up for themselves. Right. So, and that's the other thing. You can help set it up for them, but it's really good for you to teach them how to do it themselves. Right. Because you're not always going to be there with them. So it's really important they know how to do it properly because we don't want them to get injured, right? Because they didn't set it up properly for themselves. A, they may not get the benefit from doing the exercise if their machine's not set up properly for them. And B, they can potentially hurt themselves. So it's important to provide that information. All right, and then in your manual, there's all kinds of variations for workout cards. You can go online. There's tons of them. I even have a template I could, you know, provide people one that I use, but find one that works for, you know, for you and for your client. And you might actually, the facility might actually provide them as well. So do they have those at the rec?
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're familiar with working, you know, those are the ones you're going to be using. And then there's probably a spot where you can add additional information if you need to as well. And in the, you can see your manual for all kinds of different sample programs. They have ones for, introducing beginner, moderate, advanced for bodybuilder, sport specific, all different types. So in this particular one, so this is just a sample program design. So you can see we're literally going from, lower body, working our way up the body to the smaller muscles, and then finishing with abdominal, and then a little bit of spinal extension at the end. So that is a great progression. We're working all of the big muscles first. We're doing the compound or multi-joint muscles, right? And working our way up, and then gradually to the, the smaller muscles, single joint. Now, the only thing I would say here, like typically, if I was working biceps and triceps, I may not do overhead press that day. I might do it another day. So I might, if I was putting this program together for a client, I might even move the front arm raises down here, right? Because you might get a little bit tired before you get into that works your anterior delt. So, I mean, I probably massage this program a little bit, but overall it pretty much has everything in there that you would need. It's covering all the major muscle groups.
What's a torpedo press?
Oh, sorry.
What's a torpedo press?
Yes, you know what? That's actually a good question because I'm not sure. I'm going to Google that. Hold on, hold that thought.
It's not in the book.
It's
I
like
think
a
it's what they
landmine press.
call
Yeah.
a landmine press.
Yeah, it's a landmine. It's in the manual.
Oh, it's a landmine. Oh, yeah. Okay. I know landmine press. I don't know. I didn't know it was called a torpedo press. Okay. All right. Anybody here use a landmine?
Every now and then, yeah.
Yeah. They're actually really good for rotation exercises and doing things. I didn't know it was called a torpedo press, so I learned something new. Yeah, so this particular work, I mean, does have lots of options in it because it's not saying to do everything. It's just saying these are different options you can do. So yeah, it gives you a good idea of putting a program together. I do like that it starts with the big muscles and the compound movements on the bottom. That works well. Does end with the abdominals, and we're also working something for spinal extension, which is great. So dead bug, dynamic plank. What type of contraction are we using in the core?
Isometric.
Isometric, awesome. And then our spinal extension, what muscles would that work if we're doing a Superman on a Bosu?
Spinal erectors.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. All right, so here is another program. So timing for the exercises. So maybe doing 10 to 12 reps, and we're doing that, 202, so it'd be 2 count up and then no pause. So the 0 would indicate that there's no pause there, and then 2 counts down, right? So in this case, if you were doing seconds, it'd be 2 seconds up and then 2 seconds down. It could be, 3 seconds up, 3 seconds down, that kind of thing. If you were counting how long time under how long it would take you, about 48 to 72 seconds in total per exercise. And we know for hypertrophy, I think it was somewhere between 45 to 60 seconds was a really good amount of time to help develop that for hypertrophy. And if we went over that, I think I remember it saying that we're getting more into the endurance. So, keeping it below the 72 into that 48 to 60 second range would be great. And then it would be 8 to 12 minutes for one complete circuit. Beginners would have up to 30 seconds rest in between exercises. And you also have to take into consideration, how long it takes to get from one exercise to the next and get set up and all that kind of stuff. So what they're doing here is like literally figuring how many exercises can I do in the time that I have allotted, right? So You know, it's going to take you so many minutes to do. And if this was, I guess they're saying one complete circuit with no rests from doing the other program. And then if you wanted to run through it, and that's the other thing, you can do your sets, you can do your exercises all in one set, or you can actually do a circuit. So you can do each exercise through and then go back and do it again. So, I mean, you could be creative with how you put things together. The only challenge with that would be because, again, you might tire out the smaller muscles. So it does get a little more challenging as you're going through, like the second or third time. All right, so we've kind of gone through everything that you should consider from the moment that, you know, you greet your client, taking through their assessment, putting together their program, all the things that you need to think about. Okay, so now we've got it all set. We're going to meet them for the first time as we're going to take them through their first workout. So what are some of the things you need to think about? Of course, arriving on time, dressing professionally. I'm asking about the rec just because I know the majority of you are from there, but anybody else that works at different facilities, please feel free to chime in. Do they require you to wear a uniform, like t-shirt, like same t-shirt with the name on it, or?
Yeah, at rec, I see like the people using like the same t-shirt
Mhm.
that says staff.
So it'll-
Adrian said they have shirts coming in that say personal training or on them.
Oh, that's fabulous. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, that looks really professional. I love it when
Yeah.
it says personal trainer or something on it. That's wonderful. And sometimes you'll have like, they'll say, okay, wear certain colors. So they'll give you a tag that has your name and, you know, personal trainer on it. So, that's fantastic. It just makes it more professional, which is really nice. You also want to make sure you're carrying all of your documents and your paperwork. One thing I have is you can use a clipboard. That's really great. Or you can have, you know, if some places now they'll use iPads or something to keep track of everything, as long as you're tracking as you're going, right? The other thing is you want to make sure you know the muscles that you're going to be working. For your client, you want to know how to use all the machines, how to demonstrate everything. So, you know, practice if you need to. And then you want to make sure you're going to check for safety in and around the equipment that you're using, making sure that all the clips and the cables are in place. There's nothing no tripping hazards around. That's a big thing because people are working, sometimes when people work, they're not really conscious. So they may lay their weights down and not think about somebody else is going to come and trip over them, right? So just keep an eye out visually what's around you and also where you have to walk. Because sometimes especially in gyms, if things are close together, you know, you might walk by somebody that's doing some movements and we don't want to knock their weights either. So just being careful. And then if you, you know, especially when you're first starting off, if you have any questions or if you're in doubt, ask, you know, people there are there to help. I know the people at the RAC are very blessed to have Adrian because he's amazing and an amazing resource. So I'm sure he'd love to be able to help. And then, of course, we've got our PARCU or any doctor's release if we need it. If you have long hair, keep it tied back. Why would we want to do that?
So it's not distracting you mid-lift.
So it doesn't.
Yeah, it can
And
actually
for
get in the way.
sales too,
What's that?
like, because then if that's not getting attached to something.
Yeah, exactly. It can get caught in the machines. It can get caught. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if, you know, if you have to lean over to spot somebody and the hair is coming down. So make sure if you have it long, tie it back, put it in a braid, whatever, pull it back in a bun, ponytail, whatever. But just keep it out of the way. Because it becomes a safety issue. We don't want it to get caught in anything. And also make sure you have all your personal items stored away. So, I mean, most of the time we're carrying around a water bottle and a few other things. What about phone?
Boo.
I would hope to have it all.
What's that?
That I would hope have it off, so not
Yeah.
the whole gym is not ringing out.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're on the floor, please, if you have a phone and you have to carry your phone, have it turned off or at least turned to quiet mode so it's not ringing. And please don't go on it. There's nothing worse than when I look around a gym and I see a trainer working with a client and they're on their phone while the client's doing their workout. Where should your focus be?
Client.
With the client, absolutely. Because you're watching what they're doing, right? You're paying attention to their form. You're paying attention if they they need feedback, right? You've got to be focused on them. So phone goes away, leave it in your locker. Make sure that you have something to eat or you have the energy or you have your nutrition before. You don't want to be starving and hangry and need energy to help them, but you don't have it. You also want to make sure you have your hydration handy. So, and this goes for clients too. It's really important that they have, I teach classes and sometimes I'll see people and they're just bagged at the end. And it's like, did you have any breakfast? No. It's like, well, you should really be eating before, you want to make sure you have the energy. So you can always let your clients know it's important to have the right nutrition before they come because they do need to have that energy. And it's really important that they stay hydrated throughout their workout as well. Says remove jewelry. I mean, I have rings and stuff. I don't worry so much about that. But anything that could potentially get caught in a machine, if you're leaning over or if in a weight or, so that's something you may want to think about. Certainly have the appropriate clothing and the proper footwear. And then we talked about warm, welcoming body language, our voice levels, relaxed and professional. We're going to tell them what muscle groups are working, but don't go overboard. So, if you're doing a row, we're going to, hey, we're going to work our rhomboids. Those are the muscles that are in between our shoulder blades, right? So those are our mid-back muscles. And so sometimes you can gauge. Some clients love to know they want to know all the muscles. And some clients like, So it's just like, hey, our mid-back muscles, and then tell them how it should feel, right? What they should feel when they're doing it. You can also explain which joints are moving and which shouldn't move, right? So if you're doing, a deadlift and when they're coming up, your hips are coming forward, but you don't want to be throwing your back. You don't want to be throwing everything back. Same with when we're doing a kettlebell swing, right? Some people get the momentum going and the back is moving back and forth and it really shouldn't. So you want to explain which joints are moving and which shouldn't move. And then don't fold the arms. So this is common. I mean, most of the time you're not going to do that. Don't chew gum. And, don't rush people. Keep nice and calm. I mean, you want to keep to your timeline and but you don't want people to feel like they're rushed through their program. And also don't come nuts, be brief. So coming back to explaining demonstration, I had one of the students I was doing an evaluation, and when he was showing the client how to do a bench press, he proceeded to do an entire set of the bench press. So, and then I had to talk with him later and explain, well, it's not your workout, it's their workout. So you're really there just to show them the form, show them a couple of reps, give them the finer points, and then have them do it, right? So just beware of that. And then, as I mentioned, showed how to adjust the machine, adjusting any weights, how how your body should be if you want them in a power stance, that type of thing. And also clean the machines. When should you clean the machines?
Before and after?
Great point. A lot of people just do it afterwards, but think about who might have been there before you. And I can tell you, I see it in the gym all the time. People are sneezing and coughing and they're doing so. scratching and then they're touching everything. And then if you go on and use that machine afterwards, but you haven't cleaned it, then you're subject to all those germs. So it's a really good habit to get into to clean the machine before, and then of course clean it afterwards. And that's just common courtesy, right? And then the other thing, so, you show them how to adjust the machine, you can adjust the machine for them. But if I'm working with a client for a period of time, I get them to do it because I want to know that they know how to do it. And, they appreciate that because then they know when they come in, they know how to do it for themselves. And then if we have a client on a machine, what are some things you want to consider when you're adjusting the weight? For safety.
Make sure they're standing before you move the seat.
Yeah, absolutely. Any adjustments should be done. Usually they're standing, right? And sometimes, especially at the beginning, right? It's trial and error. So you get them to sit, you've adjusted it, you get them to sit. Does that work? No. Okay, get them stand up, we'll adjust it again. So there's different, it's certainly getting the adjustments. If we're changing weights, always make sure that there's no tension on any part that could move a weight, especially weight stacks on machines where you have to pull the pins out. So for example, if they're doing a leg press, right, get them to put their feet on the floor before you adjust any weights or they adjust any weights, right? Because accidentally, if they pushed, they lean forward, pushed on that platform, could raise the weight and then might drop suddenly or something, you could crush your fingers, it's not good. So always make sure that there's no weight or tension before you make any adjustments. And so adjust the body. As far as touching a client, we don't ever touch our client unless we ask permission, and it could be for something simple like, I'm just going to adjust your foot. Is that okay? Right? We ask them for permission first. We never just touch a client ever. All right. So that's a thing so but we can get them to, we can give them direction on how to adjust their own body most of the time, right? If we need to give them correction or if we need to help them, we need to ask permission before we touch them, and we have to tell them where we're going to touch them. Make sense?
Yeah.
And if they say no, then you don't touch them. But most of the time, you won't need to. But if you do, now it's a little different if we're spotting, right? Because you're going to tell them, okay, when you're doing this, I'm going to spot you. I'm going to be holding around your wrists, right? So you've already identified right up front what you're going to be doing. Yeah, so very important, especially if there's a male-female dynamic. You got to be very careful. All right, so, and then focus on the major points, the movement and how it's going to be done. So this is just explaining to the client how the exercise is being done. And then you can describe it, breaking it into smaller parts depending on different body parts. And then you're going to demonstrate. So this goes back to the principles of adult learning, right? So people learn different ways: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And so you've got some people that like to see it. So you're demonstrating it for them so they can see it. You are describing it to them so they're hearing it. So for people that are auditory, that's really good. And then some people who are kinesthetic, they like to be able to do it, right? And that's how they learn. So depending on how they learn, you want to give them all three options. And the other thing is, speaking of that, and this is going off topic just slightly, but if you learn how your client likes to learn or how they learn best, then you can structure how you work with them so that it works better for them. And what I mean by that is if you find out that your client is more auditory, so you can spend more time talking with them about different ways that they can do the exercise, because that's kind of the way they learn. If they're more visual people, you can do more demonstrating. if they're more kinesthetic, you can have them do it more. You show them briefly and then get them to do it because they got to feel it to understand it. So once you understand what works best for your client, then you can start to incorporate that more as you're going through the training. All right, so tell them where they'll feel it, right? So if you're doing that row, you should really feel that in the mid back. If they're just lifting their arm up and they're feeling it in their arm, then obviously they're not working that back muscle when they're doing their row. So you can tell them where they should be feeling that muscle working. You can give them a visual picture, as I mentioned, body movement, arm movement, whatever that is. Get them to visualize that muscle working. Some people really like that, especially people that are visual people, right? Just picture that, shoulder blade squeezing in towards your spine, right? So maybe some words like that really resonate with them and they can, they understand more of the movement. All right, and then you can talk about, the range of motion. So what is the start and the end point? If we're doing a bicep curl, our arm is fully extended. You don't want to lock the elbow, right? Keep softness in the elbow. And then you can talk about you bringing it all the way up. Then you can also talk about your tempo, which is the speed of the reps. And then you add in breathing. So as you can see, there's a lot to think about when you're training people. What we don't want to do is overwhelm them. So we may want to start with one thing. Okay, let's get our form down. What should it feel like? Right. And once they get that the first couple of times, all right, let's start thinking about our speed. And now let's add in our breath work. Where are we going to breathe in? Where are we going to breathe out? Breathing at the beginning, just having them breathing and not holding their breath is a really good thing, right? But so you can see you want to layer that in, and some clients will take a little longer to get it than others, and that's okay. But we don't want to overwhelm them at the very beginning. But these are all things that you need to put in. And then as the trainer, and that's why we don't want to be looking at our phone, we want to be focused on making sure that they're doing the correct movement. So, you can identify and describe some of these, but you don't want to go into too much detail because they're really not ready for it. It's more for your own. But so for example, just give you an example. If they're doing a push-up, you want to have a nice strong core. So they should be thinking about, bringing that belly button in, keeping their core nice and strong. We don't want them to sag. That's going to hurt their back, right? If they're doing a seated row, we don't want movement at the hips. We don't want that momentum. So just cues like that. We're talking about cueing in a few minutes. Breath work. We don't want them to hold their breath. We want to make sure that they're breathing. How to inhale to prepare, exhale on the exertion. So that's something they can get into. And you just have to keep reminding them. And after a while, it becomes natural. Just like think about when you first started and you were learning how to do all of this. Did it feel overwhelming? I know it did for me when you first started. Was it confusing?
I have a horrible time getting my breath right. Like I always have to focus on doing that right. It's always something that's always an issue for me.
Well, and you know what? It's an issue for a lot of people. So, and it's something sometimes as a trainer, you're going to have to keep repeating to people, and that's okay. You'll see after a while, some people get it, some people don't. And if you have to keep cueing them, well, that's part of your job as a trainer, right? But it's a lot to think about, right? So, and then you're going to have the client do the exercise, and then think about some of the points that may become an issue. Like, for example, if they're doing a cable row, we talked about momentum and doing the rocking back and forth was a problem. And then, we want to correct errors, but we don't want it to be like we're just telling them, oh, you're doing this wrong. So we want to use positive words. So instead of saying, don't round through the chest or don't round those shoulders, right? Keep the shoulders down and the chest lifted up. So that's a kind of a positive way. So we want to keep things in the positive and not use negative or the word don't. If we can avoid using the word don't, that would be good. We will also want to provide constructive feedback. When do we want to do that?
Not during reps.
Yeah, we probably, unless they're doing something that's imminent danger, they're gonna hurt themselves. We probably wait to the end when they finish the set and then give them the feedback and have them practice doing it, you know, with your recommendations or your feedback in the next round, right? So, yeah, we don't want to stop them unless they're like doing something terribly wrong that could really hurt them, hurt themselves. Although you can cue as you're going through. So, you know, if they're doing something and you might say something like, okay, as you're pulling back, I want you to, if they're doing a cable row, as you're pulling that cable towards you, I want you to take a big hit, you know, inhale, exhale, inhale. So you can kind of be doing the motions with them and you know, as they're doing it, and then they'll kind of synchronize with you. So you can give feedback or cues as you're going through, but you know, major feedback you'll probably wait till the end of the set. All right, and then you can evaluate and tweak throughout the session. So something that looks really good in paper doesn't necessarily always work, right? If it isn't working, just stop it. Sometimes they're not ready for that exercise, and you know, maybe it's something you've revisited another time. And as I mentioned, sometimes it just felt like, oh, that seems really interesting, but maybe it's just not working for them. So you don't have, you know, you can change things up. Anticipating any errors, be ready to correct them in a positive manner. And then always be prepared with alternate exercises. In your workbook, there's on a couple of the pages, they have charts with the different muscle groups, the different exercise, you know, an exercise and what different alternative exercises that you can do, you can create. So as I mentioned before, having a library of exercises for all the different muscle groups is great because you'll just always have alternatives if you need them. Make sure to tell them about AOMS. What is AOMS?
Acute onset muscle soreness.
Yes, exactly, because they may feel it, especially if they're doing things like leg extension, where those quads will start to burn. So yeah, you know, let them know about that as well. What should you talk about after the workout?
You can
What are
talk
some
about
of the
their
things?
accomplishments so then that they feel good and they'll be wanting to come back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you have a conversation with them. It's like, how did that feel? You know, what did you enjoy about, you know, were there some things you liked about the exercise today? Was there anything you didn't like? Right? Is there something they didn't understand? Right? Maybe they did an exercise, but they didn't really know why they were doing the exercise. So maybe they needed a little extra clarification. Could be, you know, how to use the workout card. So you're filling stuff out for them as you're going through, but you may take a quick moment and say, hey, the next time you come in, if you're on your own, you're working on your own, see here, you can track your repetitions and the weights that you're using and how many sets you do, and just show them how to use the card. You can do maybe a review of their goals and expectations. Now, if you're working with them, you know, multiple times a week, you're probably not going to do that every single time, but that at a certain point, you know, every couple of weeks, you might, or as certainly when you do your reassessment every 4 to 6 weeks, you're definitely going to be reviewing those goals and expectations because things may change. They may, you know, they may reach the goals and then they have new ones, right? Or maybe their thoughts on what they wanted, or you know, what their expectations have changed throughout the program. So always good to have that conversation. You can talk a little bit about nutrition, always within the scope of practice, and with what you guys have for basic knowledge, that would be Canada's Food Guide. So you can talk to them about Canada's Food Guide, and you had some of that information exercise theory, you will go more into nutrition in personal training. So you'll have a little broader scope of practice there. You can also talk to them about DOMS. So we know that's delayed onset muscle soreness. And you can explain some of the reasons for DOMS. What would some of those be?
Slow eccentrics.
Yep. But remember with beginners, we're probably not doing any eccentric loading, right? We don't recommend that. So what else could be causing it?
Failure to do like a cool down and stretch.
Yeah, could be. But just think about, they're using muscles they probably haven't used before. They might have had some little micro tears in the muscles. And so it's not unusual for them, especially if they are using muscles they haven't used for a while, or maybe they're using them in a different way, that they're going to feel sore, right? So yeah, just explaining. And then you can say, and the reason why we're going to do some nice stretching at the end is because that's going to help alleviate some of that soreness. So that'll encourage them to stretch at the end, which is what we want them to do. We also want to make sure that they're drinking lots of water even after the workout, because you still need to replenish and hydrate afterwards. We want to make sure they have proper rest. So you can just tell them, you might be a little tired because this is all new. So making sure to get rest so that you're going to recover quicker and be ready for the next workout, and then set a review date. So when we say set a review date, this might be, again, coming back to having a client that you're just setting up on a program, and then you're not going to see them for 4 weeks, right? So this might be just a client for the facility that you're helping out. If it's your own client, you obviously are just going to talk to them about their next workout, right? And hopefully you've got things scheduled out. And that's the other thing. If once you built that program, you're going to have them scheduled out. They'll have to go into your schedule as well. Right. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about periodization. I'm going to go for about another 20 minutes. I'm going to try to get through some of this stuff, and then we're going to go into our review, because we've got a good size review today. But just for periodization, so we talk about putting together a program, but we only use that for 4 to 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then what? Well, we got to create another program. So periodization is basically linking all of these programs together. So this means you're going to need to design programs in phases. So for a beginner, you're going to design a program that's pretty basic, maybe has some few sets. It's going to have lower weights, some simpler exercises. And then we don't want to make changes too quickly, right? We want to make sure that they get their form, they start to get their mind muscle connection, and then they're able to, make some gains. And then we're going to, maybe look at changing up some of the exercises and giving them some new ones, maybe increasing their weights. And then we'll see how that goes. And maybe that cycle lasts for another, anywhere from a couple of weeks to 8 weeks, depending on what the client's goals are, their needs are, how frequently they're coming to the gym, right? And then once they get through that, we do another program. So let's look at what that might look like. So as a beginner, their ability, lower sets, lower weights, easier exercises, as I mentioned. The average beginner, we're going to put their reps somewhere between 12 and 15. They might come twice a week. And then if they can do 15 reps, like when the 15th rep feels like the first rep pretty much, we know that they need to go up in weight, right? So once they go up in weight, we're going to drop the reps again. And how can we ascertain that they've reached that? What's one of the things that we can do?
Just find their perceived effort.
Absolutely. So we're going to be asking them. Ask them every single time. How did that feel? Scale of 1 to 10, blah, blah. Like, they'll know. You won't even have to give them the whole spiel. It's just scale of 1 to 10. They're going to tell you because they've heard it, right? And scale of 1 to 10. Oh, that felt like a 7. Okay, we know we're at a good weight. Scale of 1 to 10. Oh, it was about 4. Okay, we know we need to go up in the weight, right? So, and that means that weight goes up and our rep numbers go down. So, and then once they've done that, oh, okay, I'm going to give you a little exercise here. So you are creating a periodized program for a beginner, and we're going to put it in 3 different phases. So phase 1 is going to be, 6 weeks, phase 2, 6 weeks, phase 3, 6 weeks, consecutively after each other. In phase 1, which of the exercises would we put?
Leg press.
Leg press.
Leg press, exactly. What would we put in phase 2?
Oh,
Squat,
Wow.
and then phase 3, barbell squat. Excellent. So you know the progression. So, for a beginner, a leg press would work really well. Then we go to, and they could build some strength, some muscle. And we could be working on core at the same time. So then they can get into squat. They may start with body weight, start to add some weight, and then progressing to barbell. Excellent. Well done. All right. So here we are, periodization. So phase 1. So this would be our first program exercise for our client, right? Might do a leg press, compound exercise, multi-joint, seated hamstring curl. So that would be a single joint. We go to seated cable rows and dumbbell chest press. We might do a lat pull down. We work our arms, do bicep curl, tricep kickback, maybe do some standing calf raises and a dead bug, right? So that might be their exercises for that first phase, might be 4 to 6 weeks. It's an introductory program. It's designed for them to learn the form. We're working lots of major muscle groups. We're using higher reps, lower resistance. We might only have 1 to 2 sets, 10 to 12 reps, or it could be 12 to 15. We might do this for 2 to 3 weeks. We might even give them 1 to 2 minutes of rest in between, not between reps. It should be in between sets. But give them a little longer just as they're starting to get everything. And then we also note if a participant is struggling to lift a weight that they or you have selected, what would you recommend?
Reduce the weight.
Stop it and reduce.
Reduce, yeah, absolutely. So if they've if they're struggling with that weight, we're going to get them to stop. So that's one of the instances where we wouldn't wait to the end of the set. We'd get them to stop, and then we would reduce the intensity for them, right? So oh, I already gave that. I was going to say, so the leg, I was going to ask, I had questions here I was going to ask, but I already gave you the answer. But here's one we didn't. The hamstring curl. So I said it was a single joint. So what joint are we working?
Knees.
Knee. All right. The seated cable row, is that a push or pull exercise?
Pull.
All right. What arm muscle is the agonist?
Bicep.
And what back muscle did we say that the seated row worked really well?
Rhomboid.
Well, rhomboids is one. What's the other one? What are 3 of them? We
Latissimus
say
dorsi.
rhomboids. Latissimus dorsi. Yeah, that was the one I was looking for. Yeah. Dumbbell chest press, pushing or pulling?
Push.
Push.
Push. All right. And what are the agonist muscles?
Pectorals, tricep,
Yeah.
anterior delt.
Excellent. And what muscles are the standing calf raises activating?
Gastrocnemius.
Soleus.
And which other one?
Soleus or how we say it.
Soleus. Yeah. And in the front, if they get a really good drop on that heel,
Tibialis anterior.
tibialis anterior. Excellent. And what muscle are we really tapping into when we do our dead bug?
TVA.
TVA, and what type of contraction is it?
Asymmetric.
Asymmetric.
Oh my gosh, I'm giving you the exam tonight. You guys are kicking it. Love it. Love it. All right. So we've gone to periodization phase 2. So now we've added in the squat. We've made a couple of changes there. So we've got our hamstring curl ball, right? Anybody ever do a hamstring curl in with a stability ball?
Yeah.
No.
It's
We-
hard.
They're hard to look.
Yeah, they have
Hard.
one leg here. I don't think I would get them to do one leg for sure. I mean, that's something you work towards, but two legs for sure. You really do feel it in the hamstrings. So then they go to dumbbell bench press, and maybe they add a push up. So they could be doing a dumbbell bench press, and then maybe they get down and do a couple of push-ups. So we're almost pre-fatiguing the muscle a little bit. So we're really taking that up, to the next, to a notch. Then we've got seated cable rows. Lat pull down. So these ones are the same. Seated shoulder press, we're adding that in. We've kept the standing calf raise and our dead bug. And maybe now where we were holding our dead bug, right? And now we might add in movement at the arms and legs. So that's increasing our intensity. And maybe now we're doing, 3 sets. We're up to, 8 to 10 reps because our weights are coming up a little bit. We've decreased our rest time. So maybe instead of doing a minute, we're down to 45 seconds. We've changed up some of the equipment, and we've changed some of the methods of the exercises that we were doing. So we've made a few changes here. And then we'll see. So you might find, that might be a lot for certain clients. So we might only change a few things and then add new exercises in over time. So again, there's no hard and fast rule, but just get the concept that we start, with periodization, we have different phases, and we're looking for progression, right?
In this one,
Sorry, go ahead.
in this one, like, as you've already done the seated cable rows, wouldn't you already be worn out for the lat pull downs?
No, you can do 2 back. Actually, I always recommend 2 back to every 1 chest exercise, 2 to 1, especially for people that are sedentary and doing a lot of sitting, and because they tend to have rounded shoulder. So doing 2 back stability exercises pulls everything back. So 2 to 1 is actually a pretty good ratio. And you're actually working, I mean, with the lat pull down, you are working latissimus dorsi and both, but you're also working your rhomboids, the trapezius muscles. So you're working you're working the muscles, but you're working them in different ways. So remember, lat pull down, you're this way. With cable row, you're this way. Right? Same as if we were working same muscle group when we talked about bicep curls. If we do a supinated bicep curl, and then we do a hammer curl, right? We're still working biceps, but we're working them in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And you know what? That's also, we've increased the intensity. So. And do we change everything at once? As I mentioned, no, it's a progression. So, we might increase the sets, and then we might increase the weight. So the reps are lowered, and then we decrease rest time, change the equipment, but we don't do it all at the same time. We gradually work in there. And then the next one, so they're really progressing, right? They're doing a squat or lunge with a barbell. They're doing we've added in deadlift because they've had to learn how to do a hinge properly. And then so you can just see how we've progressed for each one. So down here, even on the dead bug, maybe now they're doing it on a BOSU, right? Which adds another degree of difficulty. So, and this is over a period of time. Some people will never get to they won't get to phase 3. They might stay in phase 2 for a long time because phase 3 may not be where they want to go, right? Depending on their goals. But it just shows you how you can periodize and progress clients. And this is just one way to do it. And of course, we can be using a lot of those different training methods we talked about earlier, supersets, right? Pyramid sets, like you can do a combination of so many different things to progress clients, but that just gives you an idea. And in between those the phases, that would be a good time to stop and do your assessments, right? So you finished phase 1, you do an assessment. You finish phase 2, you do an assessment, because that's also going to show progression, right? So any questions on that before we move forward? And again, that's just one example. There's so many ways you can put exercises, so many different exercises and ways you can put those programs together, but it just gives you an idea of progression, what that would look like. All right, so getting it right, basics, you want to make sure they're doing the exercises properly. They've got good posture, good form throughout. You want to be able to describe what good posture looks like. And what did good posture look like if they're standing?
Knees slightly bent.
Shoulders under
Open
ears.
chest.
Yeah. So if we're looking specifically for posture, right? They're standing, so their head, their ears are over their shoulders, right? Shoulders, hips, knees kind of lined up. We want to keep everything neutral. So if they're doing it, and if they're doing an athletic stance, and we want to look at stability, their feet should be, maybe hip width apart, shoulder width apart, slight bend of the knee, as you mentioned, and we want to keep everything neutral. Can you always keep a neutral spine?
No.
No, because we can, we can do lots of exercises where our spine's not going to be neutral. So that's a good thing to remember. All right. So, and these are some of our cueing, so if you are, working with client, but this is also if you're working in a group. So if you're giving cues out to a group, and that's the other thing, when you were doing your exercise theory, one of the things you would have learned is when you're cueing a group and you see somebody doing something incorrectly, do you address that person directly or do you direct it to the group?
To the group.
The group.
To the group, yes. So all corrections go to the group, or all recommendations and cues go to the group. So if you're looking out there and you see people are, if they're doing an exercise and their shoulders are up towards their ears and you want it to relax, keep your shoulders out of your ears, shoulders back and down, eyes forward. Now we have don't lock joints, but we don't want to say don't. So it could be soft knees or easy knees, or avoid locking your joints, right? We want to keep that word don't out of there if we can help it. We want to keep everything neutral, wrists on a bench press. We don't want like this. We want everything nice and strong. So usually if you can give them a visual, especially for visual people, we want to keep everything aligned. So our wrists are aligned, with our forearms kind of thing. Strong core, if you want to give them some cues, we can say things like belly button, draw your belly button in towards your spine, or even sometimes just saying belly button in, they do it automatically and they activate that TVA. We can say things, with the wrist, with the lock the bar. So remember, we were talking about the different grips, and we had one that was kind of an open grip, which we said was the suicide grip, but we really want them to make sure that they put that thumb over the bar to keep it nice and safe and locked in there. So you can give cues like, thumb over the bar to keep the bar from slipping. You can just say lock the bar. So that means when I say lock the bar, put your thumb over, make sure you're holding on with a good grip. So that can become a quick cue for you. As I mentioned, belly button in, and then breathing, because we don't want them to do the Valsalva effect. And what is that?
Breath holding.
The holding the breath, right? That intra-abdominal pressure, we want to try to avoid that. So we want to give them cues like exhale with effort or exhale with the work. And then also, stabilizing some of those non-involved joints. So just keeping everything nice and strong. Right. So you guys can come up with your own cues, whatever works for you and whatever works for your group or your clients. As long as you're getting your point across, that's the important thing. And they understand what you want them to do and they do it, right? You're always going to get, And you will always get those few people. Oh, there we go. It was buffering. I thought I lost everybody. All right. You're always going to get people, no matter how hard you try queuing them, they're just not going to get it. So what do you do in that case? Any thoughts?
Can we talk with them like later by the end
Yeah.
of the class?
Perfect. That is absolutely perfect. So maybe after class, you might go over and have a word with them and just mention that, you noticed throughout the class and maybe give them some feedback. Whether they choose to use it or not is their, that's their prerogative, but at least you've done your best and you didn't embarrass them in front of the rest of the class, which is really important. All right, on this slide, there's stars, stars, stars. So as you're going through your slides, the PDF slides, please take note. So when you are doing classes, because we primarily talked about working with clients, but if you are doing classes, the first one that you're putting together, creating a beginner class is the best way to go. And that's a beginner class that's suitable for every fitness and experience level with modifications. So we always want it, because you never know who's going to show up in your class. You might have a bunch of beginners, you might have some people that have been going to class for years. So you have to have modification for everybody. So something a little easier, something a little more challenging with the same exercise. The other thing is, if depending on the facility, you may or may not have the use of headphones. So one of the things as an instructor, if you're especially trying to yell over the music, you can really hurt your voice after a while. So protect your voice, use it sparingly, right? Get to especially if you end up doing a lot of group instruction, maybe get used to doing hand signals and cueing, that kind of thing. And also, if you do have the opportunity to use a microphone, I would encourage that. And the other thing is our music. Now, if anybody's taking the group fitness, you're going to learn a lot about music, because we talk about working to the beat, choreography. For WT, we don't. But just understand the concept, and I think you probably get it anyway, because you probably use music yourself when you're working out. But music does set the tone. One of the things it will do, and if you get to learn to count the beats in the songs or in the music, it makes it really easy to count your reps, because as long as you're with the beat, everything is on a 8, 4, 8, 12, 16, like you can count very easily. And the thing is too, with music, we know that it can motivate and increase the energy. And at the same time, at the end of the workout, if you have something really slow and easy, that's really great for stretching, so it really does set the tone for whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So just read through that slide, just know these points, it'd be great. All right, so we got a few more minutes and we're going right to our right to our review. So just connecting with the client, some of the things that make it challenging. Remember, I said we really want to build that rapport. If the facility is busy or crowded, if the instruction maybe is too complicated, we're giving them too much information and they're just feeling overwhelmed. Maybe they're just not enjoying the workout. They might find it boring. They're distracted by everything else that's going on. They might have people that are there, friends, and their blood sugar might be low because they didn't eat before they got to the workout. So these are all some challenges that you could have when you're trying to build that rapport. Workbook. Okay, so goal setting, program design, we have that in page 8. I've got all of the I've got the workbooks all printed off, because we're going to use some of the exercises in the workbooks on the weekend. Nutrition, there's really nothing that we're going to be doing here. What I might call out, that there's a couple of points on this slide that might be important. So we've only got one slide for nutrition. So just take note. Pre-exercise, we talked about making sure that you as the instructor have something to eat before you're working with clients, because you don't want to be tired and low blood sugar. or low blood glucose, same with your clients. And then we know that carbs are the primary fuel that we're using in resistance training, because remember, it's glucose is our primary fuel, and it comes from carbohydrates. If we don't have enough carbs, the body's going to make carbs from protein and glucogenesis to create carbs. The challenge with that is that protein is needed elsewhere in the body. We consider it an expensive source of energy at the expense of other functions. So we do want to make sure that we have enough carbohydrates. And I'm not talking about candy and sugar. I'm talking about, vegetables and fruits. And if you remember back to, and some whole grains as well. And if you remember back to the Canada's Food Guide on the plate, that's pretty much what, they have 3/4 of your plate is made up of. So I'm going to leave it at that. We're not going to have a lot to do. These slides are all going to be in your in the PDF. I'm going to go for another couple of minutes, and then we're going to go right to the review because I don't want to miss it. But this chart we've looked at before, and it just breaks down the energy systems and the fuel that's used, and just kind of gives you an idea of where it's used. You should be pretty familiar with that now anyways. We've done it a few times, especially with exercise theory. We strength train to burn fat. So a lot of people don't realize that strength training is a great great way to burn off fat. It doesn't burn it off directly, but well, I guess it does in some ways, because we're burning calories, and if we're burning calories, and some of that can come from fat. But we're also building muscle, and muscle's a more aerobic or more metabolic tissue, and that will burn more calories as well. And then we'll leave that at that, because that's not really important. Agility training. So we're going to talk, we're actually going to do some things on we're going to have some fun on Saturday. But you can do some agility training with your clients. Anybody ever use the ladder?
No.
There? I even use it for my ladies who are, between their 70s and 80s. And I don't get them to do crazy things, but for agility, it's a wonderful tool. For directional change, you can use it for a little bit more aerobic. I let them do whatever they want to do in it, and they're very creative. So, but no, lots of fun. You can do lots of agility training. Remember the warm up? Let me just see. I think, yeah. So warm up, remember the purpose of it. Again, releases synovial fluid. It increases our body temperature, heart rate, mentally prepares our body for that workout. And so we always want to make sure that our clients are warmed up, and also our group class. And then we use our dynamic range of motion or dynamic stretches that moves our joint through the full range of motion. Also helps to warm up the muscles, preparing for the workout. We don't want to overdo it though, and we want to target the appropriate joints. So normally if I'm, working lower body, then I would do some lower body range of motion and add in some upper body a little bit, but not as much. And then once I've done the lower body, before I transition to upper body, I might even do a little bit of dynamic upper body movement, just to make sure those upper body muscle joints are ready for the workout. And then we had this conversation last time, cardio first. So if you're working with people that want to lose weight, want to tone, who are beginners, if you are including cardio, the best time to do it probably is before your weight training. If you are doing, the focus is more on gaining strength, and you do want to include some cardio, then maybe you would do the weight training first and then have the cardio afterwards. Otherwise, the muscles might be too fatigued. So it depends, and comes back. It depends. And that's why we have the question mark there. And weights first, same thing, right? cardio equipment. So terms that you should know this already just from exercise theory. You know, heart rate, we measured in BPM, which is what?
Beats per minute.
Beats per minute, yeah. Our max heart rate, how is that calculated? 220 minus your age, resting heart rate reserve. So all of these target heart rate zone. Our VO2 max, so that's our greatest volume of oxygen that the person can consume. It measures our cardiovascular capacity. So those are just, and as we go through here, I would just say, have a look through these slides. And we already know how to calculate everything. So there's you don't need to use your calculator for the WT, right? So just know the definitions, but you won't have to calculate anything. Okay. So we won't go back into all that. This you will have to know as a personal trainer. You're going to have to know how to do it. So I'm not going to go through that. Determining the intensity, I think we know how to do that as well. And then based on whether they're a beginner or somebody that's active. So for the frequency, they might be 2 to 6 times per week as a beginner, 3 to 6 as a more active person. And obviously their their percentage intensity of max heart rate is going to be lower for beginner as we're calculating that out. Because that's the other thing when you're creating their program, you want to figure out what their target heart rate zone is. So you'll want to do that as well. And the guidelines typically were in that, 50 to 70% of the max heart rate. For beginner, could be 16 to 90 for more active persons. So just consider those guidelines as you're going through and creating the program. Our PE, our rate of perceived exertion on the modified Borg scale. For most clients, 4 to 7 is ideal. That they should be able to do the talk test, right? That's one of the rates of perceived exertion. And also when we're adjusting the cardio overload, we want to increase the intensity if their heart rate doesn't get into the training zone, if they're not seeing results, or if they can talk really easily. So if they're doing something, this is more for probably cardiovascular endurance, but if we're not seeing, any changes or any increases, maybe we need to make some changes and take the intensity up. But, if their exercise heart rate is going above where we want it to be, they can't talk, they're displaying these other symptoms, then we want to make sure we take that intensity decrease down. I think most of this is all repeat. I'm not going to go actually, yeah, so what's this one? So this is almost all a repeat of what we've already talked about. So you can go through there. I just want to see. All right, you know what? We are done. I'm going to go right into our, you'll have all of the slides, but I'm going to go right into our review because I want to make sure that you guys get that. So I'm going to escape and bring up our review. I want to make sure we have enough time for everything. All right. So any questions before we get here? Are we start on the review? All right. This is where the rubber meets the road, everyone. So this is our weight trainer review. So these are the things that you need to know for the exam. So you need to know those muscle fibers, that we have 2 types, and that the average person has equal distribution. That's really important. Doesn't matter whether you're male or female. We're born with equal distribution. That can change as we do training, but we're, the average
Sorry,
person.
I don't think we can
Yeah.
see it, or probably
Oh.
I'm
You're
not.
saying the
I can
strong
see this.
slide?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to share again. Because I think probably what happened is I lost it in the translation here. Okay, how, do we see that now? Awesome,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for letting me know, because I would have kept going. So we can see fiber type page 12?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right. So, yeah, so know that the average person has the equal distribution. We've got 2 types of fast twitch, 1 type of slow twitch, and the speed at which the fiber twitches all depends on how the muscle cell works. We want to know that. This is our chart from page 13. So just if you understand that type 1 is your slow twitch muscle, has a very high endurance, low force production, and the energy source is aerobic. We have the type 2A and the type 2B, which is also 2X. They're both fast twitch. 2A is that moderate to fast. It's the one that we're using primarily when we're doing resistance training. It has a moderate to high endurance capacity, a pretty moderate to pretty high force production as well. And it can use both aerobic and anaerobic energy sources. And then we have our type 2B, our second type of fast twitch, has a very low endurance capacity, a high force production. So where would we primarily be using these types of muscles?
Powerlifting
Or muscle, yeah, powerlifting, sorry, I should say muscle fibers. Powerlifting, yes. And it is an anaerobic energy source, which is primarily what would the energy source be?
ATPC.
ATPCP, yeah, absolutely. I know it's got all the letters of the alphabet in there. It's the alphabet one. All right. So yeah, just get a basic understanding of this, okay? And then just that we know the slow twitch are recruited first. And then when the effort increases, the fast twitch kicks in, and that's based on the size principle. Oh, hold on, what's going on there? It's going through when it shouldn't. The size principle, and that's our motor units are recruiting those smaller to larger motor units first to ensure the efficiency of the movement. That comes back to lifting our glass of water, right? Compared to lifting a 40-pound kettlebell with the same arm, right? So we're going to recruit a lot more muscle fibers trying to lift that heavy kettlebell than we will lifting the glass of water. But as we know, our bodies are brilliant, so everything happens in milliseconds. We don't even know. And then our motor units, we want to, just understand that only 1 type of fiber is found in each motor unit. So we don't have any mixing. So you're not going to have a bunch of fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers being controlled by the same motor unit. And just understand what the different definitions are. So the motor nerve's the type of efferent nerve that relays instructions from the brain to the motor unit. So it's telling it to actually do a certain movement. And the motor neuron is a specific type of neuron that transmits the signal from the CNS, so the central nervous system, to the muscles or glands. And then the motor unit consists of the motor neuron, and then all of the muscles fibers it controls. And as I mentioned, only 1 type of fiber is found in each motor unit, no mixing. So understand that everything is from the anatomical position, and that is that the feet and the hands are forward, the feet are slightly apart, the arms at the side, hands are supinated. You do need to know all of your definitions, and I think we've gone through those a few times now. I think everybody should be pretty familiar with what those are. Also, our definitions for flexion, extension, all of these. Okay, what those are. Know your planes of movement and some of the exercises that can be done. So just remembering that sagittal plane, the movement is forward and back. And you can just imagine, because you're divided down the middle, so your movement is forward. It could be walking up a hill, doing a lunge, doing a squat, doing your deadlifts, all of crunches, all of those things are done in the sagittal plane. And that's our flexion and extension only. Then we've got our oh my gosh, my brain. our frontal and also known as the coronal. And that's our sideways movement. So everything is lateral, sideways, abduction, adduction, lateral flexion. And some of the exercises that you can do, lateral raises, she's raising her arm. You could do some side lunges, so just lunging to the side leg raises like she's doing here. Jumping jacks would be a good example of an exercise. Side shuffles, lateral band walks, so all of those things. So just get familiar with the movement in that plane of motion. And then we have our transverse, which is dividing our body into upper and lower, and everything is rotational or twisting movement is in the transverse plane. So trunk rotation, moving around, doing twists, internal shoulder and external shoulder rotation, hip rotation, swinging a bat or a golf club, throwing a punch, all of those things are done in the transverse plane. Also, understand we're going to know all the muscles and their functions, but also know what the agonist is also known as the prime mover. It's the muscle responsible for the action with the tension. What the antagonist is, so it's the opposing muscle, synergist, it's assisting, and also the stabilizer is just holding that joint stable during the action. So understand what all of those are, the definition, and then also our types of contractions. So we have isometric, and then we have our isotonic, which is the concentric and eccentric contraction. We know concentric is when the muscle shortens or contracts, and the eccentric is when the muscle lengthens or elongates. And we know that when we have we have opposing muscles, so we have agonists in a bicep curl, for example, would be our I've got a dot moving around. That's so weird. I don't know where it's coming from. And we've got the bicep brachii would be our agonist in the up phase of a bicep curl, and the tricep would be the antagonist. So just understanding what those are as well, and that in the up phase, we're doing positive work. In the down phase, we are doing negative work, which is associated with eccentric. I think we're okay for this. Go through. So for the exam, know the muscle action for each of the muscle groups. And as I mentioned before, you don't need to know the insertion or origin points at all. All right, so for the pectoralis major, the action is adduction, medial rotation, horizontal flexion. And we know exercises like the chest press, chest flies, and push-ups work the pectoralis major very well. Also, and bench presses, that type of thing. And we know that because the attachments here on the arm, even though we don't need to know origins and insertions, but we just need to know basically where it's attached because it's on the arm, you can see where it would pull the arm in, which would work well for adduction. Our serratus anterior, we know, is the muscle that protracts the scapula. So that means it's what is it opposite to? What retracts the scapula? Rhomboid. So it's the opposite, right? So, and it holds that scapula towards the rib cage. And we know things like punching and boxing, overhead press, wall slides, those kinds of things, scapular push-ups will work our serratus anterior. So again, know the movement, know a few exercises that it will work as well. And then we have, I don't know what's going on. Does anybody else see a little red?
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
see it.
sometimes.
I don't know where that's coming from. It's so weird. All right. So we have I don't know, somebody's got a laser through my window. I don't know. Just looking. So we have the rectus abdominis, and we know its primary function is to flex the spine, right? And it's, so it's involved, exercise would be curl-ups or sit-ups. So if I was giving a cue to somebody about how, like thinking about doing a curl-up, would saying something like, you know, move your ribs closer to your pelvis, would that be a good cue for them?
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a good cue to remember. Bring your ribs closer to your pelvis. And you can see why that would work, because those fibers, that's how the muscle runs, right? So it's when you contract, that will be pulling your ribs closer to your pelvis. All right, and then our obliques, we know those are our twisty muscles. Those are the ones that help us to rotate. And we also would use them in lateral flexion, which means side bends, right? Going side. So side bends and twist. So they work both in the transverse and also in our coronal or frontal planes. Yeah, okay. And then we have our TVAs, right? That's our girdle. That's our deep core stabilizers. And we use those in exercises when we do dead bugs, planks, bird dogs, that kind of thing. And there's a cross section as we looked at before, so we can see where rectus abdominis is just in the front, and then we have our external obliques, and beneath those internal obliques, and then our TVAs are our really deep core abdominal muscles. And we know that they're important for stabilizing. We know our iliopsoas is one of our major hip flexors, right? And we don't need to know the two different muscles. We just need to know iliopsoas, that it's a hip flexor. What is the opposite muscle to the iliopsoas? What is a major hip extensor?
Gluteus max.
Glute max, that's right. All right, and we know that the function of the core muscle is to stabilize the spine and the pelvis. Right, that's the important thing to know, to remember. Our quadriceps femoris. So we know that the rectus femoris. So in ET, we didn't need to know the individual muscles that made up the quadriceps, but you should remember the rectus femoris is a quadricep. Okay, the rectus femoris is a quadricep. That's important to remember. And it's the only one that crosses the two joints. So it extends over the knee and also flexes at the hip. All right. So it's a weak hip flexor. Its primary movement is at the knee. And what is one of the exercises that we can do to help strengthen our quads?
What?
Yeah, so like I don't know what's going on. It's like somebody else has control of my slides. It's so weird. Yeah, so it's like if we're doing a leg extension as well, right? You really helped. I should have said, what is one that's good isolation exercise that really focuses on the quads, and that would be a leg extension, right? So in the leg extension, are the quads the agonist or the antagonist?
Negatives.
The agonist, yeah. So what would the antagonist muscle group be?
Hamstring.
Hamstrings, exactly. So in a leg extension, the quadriceps are the agonist and the hamstrings are the antagonist. Okay. And only the rectus femoris flexes at the hip. And then we have our adductor group. And again, you don't have to remember what the individual muscles are. We just need to understand what they do. They adduct at the hip, and the antagonist would be the glute medius, right? So, and you'd see that, an example would be in our side lying leg lift. So when the glute med was, the agonist would be in the up phase in that side lying leg lift. And then in the lowering phase, it would be the antagonist, because in the lowering phase, that's where we're using our adductor group. They're adducting the hip. Right? So just get clear on that motion, abduction and adduction, and which is working. So agonist and antagonist. We know in the biceps brachii that it's flexing and supinating the elbow and flexes the shoulder. So it's primarily at the elbow, but can also flex at the shoulder. So flexion. What other muscle flexes at the shoulder?
Deltoid.
Yeah, which one?
Anterior.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Perfect. Oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on with these slides. It's like there's a gremlin in my system. Yeah, so exactly. So just get clear on that. It helps to flex and supinate the elbow. So when we supinate the elbow, is there palm up or down?
Up.
Up. That's right. All right, and then when you're exercising the bicep, like bicep is used during pulling motions. So we always say back and bis, chest and tris. And then we have our triceps brachii. It crosses two joints. It extends the arm at the shoulder. So where our bicep flex the arm at the shoulder, the tricep extends the arm, so it pulls it back. Okay. And then extends the elbow joint. So it straightens it out. And the triceps are used in pushing exercises. And we have a demonstration here. So anything with a push typically uses chest and also triceps. All right. And then we know that our superior trapezius primarily elevates the scapula. So if you're, if you're thinking trapezius, always think elevation of the scapula. And then our inferior trapezius helps to retract the scapula. What else helps to retract the scapula?
Rhomboid.
Rhomboids, exactly. Oh my gosh. I have no idea what's going on. That's so weird. And remember, think that strengthening the trapezius can help in the prevention and correction of rounded shoulder syndrome. So if somebody comes to you and they're hunched over and they're, because they're looking on their phone all the time, right? We want to get that posture, their shoulders back and down again. Helping with that would be strengthening the trapezius. All right. Our rhomboids retract, and we know that we can use band pull aparts, seated cable row works it, single arm dumbbell rows, different rowing action will help with that. I think everybody's got the rhomboids retract. Our erector spinae, it's our guy wires for our spine. So if the erector spinae extends the spine, what is the muscle that's opposite?
Rectus abdominis.
Rectus abdominis, exactly. So rectus abdominis flexes the spine, so you're going forward, and the erector spinae extends the spine. And then remember also that the erector spinae isometrically contracts in the down phase of a squat. So it's an isometric contraction, keeping everything nice and stable, working with that TVA and other core stabilizers in the down phase of a squat. Okay. And then we have our gluteal muscles, and we've already said our glute med. What is its opposite muscle? Because it's a hip abductor. What was the hip adductor?
Adductors.
Yeah, the adductors, the hip adductors. Yeah. And then the glute minimus is a stabilizer muscle. It works, during standing, walking, that type of thing. And then our glute max, it's a powerful hip extensor. So what was the opposite muscle to that again?
Iliopsoas.
Iliopsoas, which is a flexor. Excellent. And we know it's working when we're doing squats and lunges and weighted step ups and hip thrusts. And so, and this is, and also bridges, that type of thing, right? So we want to make sure if people are, you know, sedentary and they're doing a lot of sitting, that we are strengthening glute maximus because they probably have tight, short iliopsoas and they're going to have weak glute max. So we want to strengthen those. And then we have our hamstrings. So what was, it was the rectus femoris was the quad. This is the biceps femoris or femoris, however you want to pronounce it. So remember, in the hamstrings, in the back is the bicep and the front is rectus femoris. So like try to remember those two. It's important to know the difference. All right. So you do need to know your three hamstrings, the biceps femoris, semimembranous, and semitendinous. And that they extend the hip and they flex the knee. So if you're standing up straight and you bring your heel back towards your bum, flexing your knee, you are using your hamstrings. And note that the gluteus max, or one of the gluteals, and the hamstrings, they both are hip extensors. So we just talked about the glute max being a hip extensor. The hamstrings are also a hip extensor, so they do work together. And I think we did leg extension. So in a leg curl, is the hamstring or the quad the agonist?
Hamstring.
Hamstrings are the agonist, right? So what's the antagonist?
Quad.
Quads, right? So always know your front and back or your opposite muscles. That's important. Our gastrocnemius, we know that. What was the name of that tendon? Anybody remember?
Achilles.
Achilles, that's right. So we know our gastrocnemius crosses two joints, flexes the knee, and its really primary function is plantar flexion. And we know that we can have calf raises. Oh my gosh, I don't know where that's coming from. It's going to drive me crazy. That calf raises are the exercises, and things like jump squats will work our gastrocnemius very well. We also know that the soleus crosses only one joint, and the best exercise to work the soleus is the heel raise or calf raise. Should remember that from exercise theory. Okay, got a couple of questions for you guys. What muscles are the hip extensors?
Glute max and hamstrings.
Yep. What muscles are the hip flexors?
Iliopsoas.
And what was the other one? What was the weak one?
Rectus
Rectus
femoris.
femoris. Good. What movement targets the anterior deltoid?
Right. Raise.
Front raise.
What's that? Front raise? Did you say front raise?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. What about the medial deltoid?
Flying lateral. Oh, wait. Lateral raise.
Yeah, exactly. Good. And then what about if your client has round shoulders through hunched posture, what back muscle would we really want to strengthen?
Rhomboid.
That one.
Trapezius.
And what was the other one we said?
Trapezius.
Trapezius.
Yes, the trapezius. And what muscle is the biceps femoris muscle part of? Or what muscle group, I should say, is the bicep femoris muscle part of?
Hamstring.
Hamstrings, right. Great. Great job, guys. All right. Which of these muscle pairs are agonists and antagonists? Let's see. So in a so is this a antagonist or opposite pair?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Is this one?
Boo. No.
And what should it be?
Quads and hamstrings.
Quads and hamstrings, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Gastrocnemius anterior tibialis. Yes, it is. Transverse TVA and rectus femoris.
No.
No, no. Our glute med and hip adductors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. How about our erector spinae and rectus abdominis?
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what does the erector spinae do? What to the spine?
Flexes.
Extends.
Extends. Yeah. The rectus abdominis flexes and the erector spinae extends. An easy way to think about that is the rectus abdominis is in the front of the body, right? So it's when you flex would pull you in, right, or pull you down, whereas the erector spinae is in the back, so it would extend out. And one more, the glute maximus and iliopsoas.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so and we want to know when we're in our squat, what joints that we're working, our hips, knees, and ankles. They are all in flexion on the down phase. It's important to understand how the head is positioned, right? The neck should be aligned with the back and the spine. And we also want to understand that a good squat depth, especially to prevent any knee, like soreness for the knee, is 60 to 90 degrees of knee flexion, right? And 90 degrees would put you pretty much parallel, your thighs pretty much parallel to the floor. So good squat depth, you don't have to go any deeper than that. And that will help to protect the knees. Okay, important to remember. And our squat, what are the muscles that we're using? Our glute max, our quadriceps femoris, our soleus, and our gastrocnemius. I mean, we're using obviously other muscles, but these are our primary movers or prime movers or agonists. And in the down phase of the squat, are these muscles contracting concentrically or eccentrically?
Eccentric.
Eccentric, exactly. Remember, you can't go wrong in the down phase if you say eccentric. Pretty much everything is eccentric in the down phase. All right, and then we got to know the antagonist. So that would be our iliopsoas, our hamstrings, or tibialis anterior, and those are all lengthening passively on the up phase to allow the other muscles to do their work. And that we know that in the up phase, our glute max, our quadriceps, our gastrocnemius, and soleus are all contracting concentrically. And our hips, knees, and ankles, which are the joints involved in a squat, are all in extension, right? So that's important to remember. Our squat stabilizers, we know we've got a number of them here, our adductors, our glute med and min, our peroneals, those were the muscles on the side here that connect over the ankle joint. Our erector spinae, and we know understanding or remembering that it stabilizes the spine isometrically is very important. Our TVA and also our multifidus, that's just another muscle in the back. And then in our push-ups, we understand what joints were involved. So remember what we said, what joints are involved in a push-up?
Shoulders, elbows, and wrists.
Yeah. And then we have our pec major, anterior deltoids, and our tricep brachii are all involved as the prime movers. And what kind of contraction is happening in the up phase for the pec major and the triceps brachii muscles?
Concentric.
Concentric. So the down phase must be
Eccentric.
eccentric. So going down, eccentric, coming up is concentric. And when if you were giving a cue for breath, where would you tell them to exhale?
On the up.
On the up phase. That's right, because that's their work. All right, what are some of the muscles that we would use in a row? Actually, let's say what joints are we using in a row?
Shoulder.
Shoulders and
And elbows.
elbows, exactly. So we're using shoulders and elbows. And what are some of the major muscles that we're using in the back?
Latissimus dorsi.
Lombar.
Erect, erector spinae is keeping us there.
Well, it's more isometric, but it's so the
Or-
major
yes.
ones would be the latissimus dorsi, the rhomboids, and the trapezius. And then we have our biceps brachii, which are helping. Because remember, whenever we use our back muscles, if we're doing a pulling motion, then our biceps are involved, right? So the ones with the stars are especially important to remember as the major muscles involved in a seated row. And in the pull phase, so we're in that pull phase, are these muscles contracting concentrically or eccentrically?
Concentric.
Concentric, that's your work, right? So they are concentrically. So even if you can't remember, so say you're answering a question, feel free to do the movement. So if I see everybody do this, I'll know what question. But do it and feel the muscle, and then you should be able to tell whether it's concentric or eccentric, right? Whether it's contracting concentrically. All right, let's have a couple of questions here. How do you make a lunge more stable?
Hands on the hips.
What I'm thinking more about where their feet are.
You could widen their base.
Widen their base of support, right? We don't want them to be doing their tightrope. Is it okay for someone to lift their heels when they are squatting?
No.
No. We want to have full foot contact on there. A lot of times, what would be a reason that they might lift their heel?
They don't have good ankle flexion.
Exactly. They don't have that ankle mobility. So we might do some exercises to help them strengthen their ankle, around their ankle joint. What would be a couple of good exercises to do?
Calf raises.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also want to make sure that we're getting good extension. So even though we do our plantar flexion going up on our toes kind of thing, but we also want to get into maybe on a step where they can drop their heel, so we get really good range of motion. So yeah, we don't want them to be lifting their heels when they're squatting. In a squat, it's that in the lowering phase, is it eccentric or concentric?
Eccentric.
Eccentric.
Eccentric. And do you breathe in or out in the exertion phase?
Out.
Out. We exhale, that's right. And what is a common error on a row? We're doing a cable, or like a row. What's a common error?
Bouncing the
Shrugging.
Shrugging, yeah. What's another one?
Leaning back too far.
Yes. But what that is too. The thing, what I'm thinking about is, what's this?
yeah, like the bouncing of the
Yeah,
body.
we got the rocking back and forth, right? They put a lot of momentum in it. So rocking is a very common error for row. All right, there's a lot of muscles, a lot of asterisks on this slide. So muscle does not turn to fat once you stop working out, right? Does spot reduction work?
No.
No. We know that strength training increases metabolism. It does help with weight loss and enhances independence and ADLs, which are,
Activity of daily living.
that's right. Do larger muscles take longer to recover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And which takes longer to recover, fast twitch fibers or slow twitch fibers?
Fast.
Fast twitch fibers take longer to recover, that's right. Do men and women have a similar neurological response to
Yeah.
adaptations to resistance training?
Yeah.
Yes. So would someone that has trained in the past show results more quickly when they resume
Yes.
their activities? Yes, absolutely they do. Yep, perfect. Oh, missed one there. So gains in the first few weeks of training are usually due to neuromuscular factors. That's that mind-muscle connection, right? So sometimes you'll see people they'll make gains very quickly. They'll be able to lift heavier weights. They'll be able to do a lot more things. All right, got that. We know that DOMS means delayed onset muscle soreness. What are some of the causes for DOMS?
No stretching.
Yeah, not stretching. Yeah, absolutely. What's
Tears in the
happening to the
muscle fiber?
muscles? Yeah, so we've got tears in that connective tissue, and the one thing I want you to take away, even though we talk about eccentric loading and eccentric contractions can contribute to DOMS, and that's absolutely true, but there's a lot of other factors that can contribute. So it can be, you've lifted too much weight, you did too many reps, you're doing the exercise too long. Like there's maybe doing it incorrectly. There's all kinds of different reasons that you end up with DOMS, not just eccentric loading, right? And do we use eccentric loading with beginners?
No.
Correct. That is correct. And that's important to remember. So remember that even though, DOMS and eccentric loading are often, people often say that eccentric loading is a cause or is the primary cause. It's not necessarily the primary cause. It's one of the reasons, but I guess the real fact would be you want to make sure that you don't do eccentric training for beginners. Okay, let's leave it at that. All right, so know what your what this means, the frequency, intensity, time, and type. Understand what progressive overload means, and it's just the use of resistance over and above what the muscle usually performs. So, and overload and resistance are kind of interchangeable, because if you see something about overload, it just means they're adding extra weight typically. And this is just flowing through, and I have no idea why. It's doing its own thing. All right, so, and progressive overload, it is a never-ending effort. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, you get the same results. So we do want to make sure we progressively overload our clients, but we want to do it safely and effectively. And then, our safe rate of increase, we know, is somewhere between 2 to 5%, and it depends on also the size of the muscle, right? A smaller muscle, you're going to use a smaller increase, whereas the larger muscle can tolerate maybe a little larger increase. And then we talked about some of the ways that you can increase intensity without changing the weight. And that was doing things like increasing the number of reps and sets that you may be doing, or decreasing the rest time in between sets, because if you have less rest, it's more intense for the workout, right? I might be going a little bit over time, so hopefully everybody can hang in. We're probably about 10 slides away, 15 slides away, and we're done. Know the ceiling effect, and if it all comes down really to genetic potential, and there is a decreased rate of improvement as you reach your genetic max. The potential results will slow down. You won't have to you probably won't have that issue with a lot of your clients. This typically is for people that are working really at a really high level, like athletes, but just that principle that you can work harder and harder and not get the results. It's a decreased rate of improvement. Understand a couple of where the stars are, what these are. So isokinetic machine just means the speed is controlled by the and it's constant, and the weight is consistent. So in an isokinetic machine, the speed's controlled, it's constant, and the weight is consistent. That's important to remember. Isometric, we understand that it is the tension in the muscle, but there's no change in the length. So we're not contracting or elongating, it's staying the same. And so the joint angle and the muscle length do not change. So when you're doing a bicep curl, the joint angle gets smaller and then larger as you're flexing and extending. But when you're holding it, an isometric hold, that joint angle does not change, the muscle length does not change. And what were a couple of the exercises we talked about? Farmer carry could be dead bug, planks, all of those things. Yeah, exactly. And then isotonic, just remember that we've got our concentric and eccentric contractions, and the exercise is done against fixed resistance. So fixed resistance just means that it's like a weight, like a dumbbell. So the weight's not going to change, right? So the resistance remains constant. So just remember in isotonic, the resistance remains constant, and you can only lift as much as the muscle is capable of at the weakest point, and typically that is your sticking point. So, and we talked about what those were. And then momentum, the big thing to take away from momentum is that the greater the momentum, the higher chance or risk for injury, right? We know what the Valsalva effect is. It's that intra-abdominal pressure. It's literally we're holding our breath and can have all kinds of health issues as a result, raising blood pressure. It is an unsafe practice, and we don't do it with our clients. Some of the pros of using free weights. So the big thing to take away here for free weights, the characteristic of resistance training with free weights is that the muscle is not continuously overloaded throughout the full range of motion. So, and it's the most difficult to do at what point? If you're doing range of motion.
Sticking point.
The sticking point, exactly. It's just, so this thing is just doing its own thing right now. I must have hit a timing button or something. I have no idea. All right, so I'm going to, I don't know if I can get that to stop, but the some of the pros, again, increased variety of movement and lots of patterns possible compared to doing it with machine, right? So machines, you're kind of stuck in one mode of movement. With free weights, you can do all kinds of variety of movement and patterns. So lots of good reasons to use free weights. And then we have the con is that the load remains constant, but the lifter is only as strong as the weakest point of the range of motion. And again, what is that?
Sticking point.
The sticking point, exactly, right. And you might require a spotter. You may be may be intimidating. And it's difficult to work some parts of the body, like your hamstrings and your abs, although there's the exercises you can do around that. Cable machine, what you want to remember, it can be either a variable or a fixed resistance. So if you're, given a few choices, remember that cable machines can be variable. And then there's lots of different exercises that you can do with it, all the different attachments that you can use. So, etc. All right, and then our variable resistance equipment, important definition to remember. The definition of variable resistance is that variable resistance matches the changing strength potential of the muscle throughout the range of motion. Whereas with the free weights, that was different. So, oh my God. So again, variable resistance matches the changing strength potential of the muscle throughout the range of motion. And some examples that we would probably see or use at the gym are resistance bands and exercise tubing. That's probably some that we would use with our clients. And if we're putting together a program, so for endurance training just means the ability of muscle to make repeated contractions against resistance. And remember where it's going to be higher reps and lower weights. Higher reps and sometimes called dynamic strength. And we're just if we're going to make changes, we're going to adjust one variable at a time. That could be reps, sets, weights, or rest. For hypertrophy just means muscle building. And we want to do that, especially if people want to get stronger, because we know that larger muscles gives greater force. We're going to be in that moderate rep range, somewhere between 8 to 12 reps. Oftentimes, we're going to use split routines, and we know the best way to grow muscles is through higher volume. So the more volume, the more hypertrophy you're going to get. And that contrasts with strength, because you don't necessarily have to use a whole bunch of volume, but you do have to use higher weight. So whereas hypertrophy is more on volume, the strength is more on weight.
If I go away, it's just my phone's going dead. I have 2% left.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I can just leave.
All right. And then, so for muscular strength, it's defined as the muscle force, max force that a muscle can, oh, Lord have mercy, can exert in a single all-out effort. And that is, you know, really high weight, low reps, close to 1 rep max. The most important factors for developing strength are the amount of resistance and the total number of reps. Again, volume, but it's the higher weight is really, really important. That's how you're going to build your strength. And then power is defined as strength times speed, right? It's often used by competitive athletes, and you would be training closer to the 1 rep max with that. We had our guidelines here. That is out of your book. It's pretty much the what we just actually talked about again today. So you can make sure you know that. And just knowing that you've got longer rest time for your strength, a little less for hypertrophy, and then less than that for muscular endurance, because it doesn't take as long to recover. Understand all your major muscle groups, what they do, and we just went through all of that. Also, that when you're building your program, you want to do full body, and these are all the ones that you want to work: our legs, our back, chest muscle, smaller muscles, and our core. And we want to do multi-joint before we do single joint. So multi-joint would be, an example would be what?
Squat.
Squat, and then single joint?
Bicep curl.
Yeah, bicep curl, exactly. And then we did this one already, but we did the putting everything in order. So we do the dynamic range of motion first, which is dynamic stretching. We do our cardio endurance, alternating muscle growth, stabilizer muscles, and then stretching. And as I mentioned before, that's good to know. Understanding what good posture looks like, you know, assessing it's neutral. We can assess from the side, the back, kind of use a thumb line or plumb line, do a visual. And then we know that we can't always have neutral posture, can't always be maintained, because we can do exercises that don't involve neutral posture, like twists and bends and crunches and curl ups and those kinds of things. We also know that if we're creating a program for a class, we want to make sure that we put, you know, all of our components in order. And typically it's going to be a warm up. We're going to do our cardio cool down, our weight training, and then our cool down and stretch. That's if we're including cardio. If we don't include cardio, then you know, it's warm up or weight training and then cool down and stretch. And then for a client, we have it in there with a question mark, because it depends on whether we're going to include cardio or not. We just did this slide, so we'll go over, just go over quickly. So we know that if you're just starting off and teaching fitness classes, the best thing you can do is create that beginner class that's appropriate for all levels and has modifications. Make sure, you know, in order to save your voice, you want to use it sparingly and use a microphone if you can. And we know that music can set the tone for a class, help you keep count of the repetitions, like, and then also it can be motivating and help to increase the energy of the group. So important slide to remember. We know that most programs that you're going to create are going to be typically for beginners, or and then their whole body programs 2 to 4 times a week. You're going to be working on one of these. So typically you're going to start with that muscular endurance, move towards hypertrophy or strength if that's what the goal of the client is. Oh my goodness. And then we know that eccentric contractions are not recommended for beginners. And we talked about how you'd help a client who is struggling to lift a weight. We would just, get them to stop and change the weight, lower it for them, and encourage them to use proper lifting techniques. And we might even start them again with no weight until they get the form right, and then add weight back in. We know for nutrition that carbs are the primary fuel used in resistance training. We should encourage people to eat prior to exercise so that they have enough fuel for their body. And we know that if we don't have enough carbs, our body will make carbs from protein. And that can be an expensive source of energy at the expense of other functions. So carbohydrates should be an important part of most people's diet, And that is it. Okay. Whew. That was a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. So how are we feeling? Do we have any questions?
I'm excited for Saturday.
We went a little bit over time, so I apologize, but and I'll send a little note out to the group, but we will, so for 9 o'clock, I'll be there probably about 8:45, 20 to 9, because I'm not even familiar with the facility, so I just have to get in there and see where everybody is. Who's at the rec? Ingrid, you are, right?
Not now.
What's that?
Oh, yeah. I'm part of
Yeah.
the rec,
So,
yeah.
where's a good place for everybody to meet? Because we're going to be going into the fitness room to start, and I don't even know where that is.
At the fitness room, so we can like park on the top of rec.
Okay.
So everybody will see like a ramp, and we can
Okay.
just wait like after the door. That's
Okay.
just in front like of the fitness room.
Okay, so there's an upper parking lot, and that's the best place to park?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm
because
gonna
the
make a
down
note.
one, it's near like so the pool. So
Okay, so the one that's lower is for the pool, so the upper
Yeah.
parking lot. Okay, perfect. And then there's some doors there, and where does it lead?
yeah, just like in front of the fitness room. They
Oh,
will
it is
lead,
in
like,
front. Okay, perfect.
yeah, like it's just on the left after the doors. If you look to the left, you can see
Okay.
like I think it's TRX, like
Okay.
the big bar for
Yeah.
TRX. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's the front for the fitness.
Okay, all right, perfect. So I guess that's where, if everybody parks on the upper parking lot, they could go right in, and we'll go right into the fitness room there. And I understand that there's a really nice little cafe there in the building that
Yeah.
people can get food. Is it open on Saturdays, do you know?
Yes,
It is. Okay, perfect. So you can bring your lunch and snacks, or you can have, I guess, get lunch there if you like. Do bring something to keep hydrated. Make sure you've got your comfortable gym clothes and sneakers to do exercise. We're going to spend part of the day in the gym, but we're going to also focus on doing some things for teaching class, because I know there's a lot of people that would enjoy that, like doing some circuit training, having some fun time. And yeah, so the first thing we are going to do though when we get there on Saturday morning is to write the exam. We're going to get it over with, and then we can just enjoy the rest of the day. So I will try to get the video up as quickly as I can tonight, if at tomorrow morning at the latest, so people have time to go through it. All the PDF slides are already up. So, and I put a copy of a session 2 from my last class that I did in February.
Oh, great.
So there's a session 2 there if you want to review it. But I would just honestly go through the slides. I think that's probably your best bet, because you'll see all the ones that are important points.
Do you need anything for the exam, like the pen or something?
A pen or pencil, whatever you're going to use to write the exam. So I know most of you probably done the online, but the paper one, we do have, you're going to be writing a paper one, and you'll need a pen or pencil for that. You don't need a calculator. So it's just 60 questions, multiple choice. You've got about an hour. If you need a little extra time, that's okay. We're okay for that. And yeah, I think everybody's going to do very well. You guys are throwing the answers out tonight. That's why I said I could just give you the test tonight. You'd all do well.
just out of curiosity, when the results will be for the tests?
Well, because I'll have them with me. I'll probably mark them when I get, depending on how tired I am when I get back on Saturday night, probably Sunday morning. So you'll have them at some point on Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I do try to get them as quickly as possible because I know everybody wants to know. So I appreciate that. And if there is a need to rewrite the exam, no problem. We have it online. And you can, take some time to study and then book it and we'll do it online. That's not a problem at all. And there's no extra cost for that.
Oh, thank you.
There's a practical exam for this too, or what?
There is a practical exam. So once you've done like the in-person day, and then you can actually book your practical. So, and I can tell you more about that when we get together, but essentially you can either do an in-person practical, and that can be teaching a class or working with a client one-on-one. You have an evaluator there, either part of the class or just kind of observing you teaching. The alternative to that would be to have you could send a video. Now, if you're at the RAC, I think Adrian's going to do your practical evaluations.
Yeah, I think he said something like
Yeah. So just for the ones that are at the RAC, Adrian's going to be doing those primary. And then for anybody that's not affiliated with the RAC, you'll be going through me. Yeah. And if you're not living in depending what area you're in, if we're not close together, we'll probably do something either via video or we'll have somebody in your area. If we have somebody in your area that can do the evaluation, we can do it that way. So either way, we will get it accomplished for you. All right.
Heather,
Any other questions?
Perfect.
just before you go, I believe I'm still hitchhiking with you.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you mind just emailing me your address?
I
and
can
a
do that, no
time,
problem.
And I'll be there 10 minutes early with bells on and
Okay.
certainly entirely awake at that hour. And
Well, I'm glad. Actually, I was gonna say I was gonna joke and say I'm glad one of us, but I'm a morning person, so it'll be a different thing on the way home. But morning I'm good. So I will email you my address.
perfect. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, so I guess I'll see everybody on Saturday morning. Looking forward to meeting you all in person and and have a good couple of days. Please don't stress. You guys know this stuff. As I mentioned to pretty much everybody, especially the ones that just went through ET, WT is very similar. So you'll all do very well. And I'm excited. I am so excited to have you guys all do this program because I know you're going to make amazing trainers and the ones that are going on to do personal training. I'm excited. So, all right, we will see you on Saturday. Get some rest and you'll do great. Don't worry about it.
Thank you so much.
All
Thanks.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
see ya.
guys. See
Good
you
night.
Saturday. Oh, tomorrow.